So hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel Cosmic Harry, and I really welcome all of you to this channel. So before we move on to the story, I really want to thanks to all of you who are supporting this channel. It really means a lot. So today we are going to see a what if Harry Potter had a Peverell ring and he had ability to summon any witches that he loved previously. So if you are new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe and like the video. Also a little warning because it can be a little bit hard. Also, if you haven't pressed that bell notification yet, so please press that. Whenever I upload videos, you get the notification first. So yeah, now without any further delay, let's get straight to the video.
The vault beneath the vault. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, which was unusual because Wizarding Post almost never came on Tuesdays. Harry had been lying on his back on the thin mattress in the smallest bedroom of number 4, Privet Drive, staring at a crack in the ceiling that looked a bit like the scar on his forehead if he squinted hard enough. He'd been doing a lot of staring since coming back from the Department of Mysteries 3 weeks ago. Staring and not sleeping, and sometimes forgetting to eat until his stomach cramped so hard it pulled him out of whatever dark corridor his thoughts had wandered down. Sirius was dead. That was the fact he kept running into no matter which direction his mind turned. Sirius was dead, and Harry had walked straight into a trap, and the prophecy was rattling around in his skull like a marble in a tin can. Neither can live while the other survives, and Dumbledore had known for 15 years and said nothing. The owl tapped the window again, harder this time, impatient. Harry pushed himself up and crossed the room. It wasn't Hedwig, she was out hunting, one of the few freedoms he allowed himself to feel good about. This owl was enormous, dark gray, with amber eyes that regarded Harry with an expression that could only be described as professional. A Gringotts owl. He recognized the breed. They were specially trained, magically reinforced, and famously impossible to intercept. He opened the window and the owl swept in, extended its leg with mechanical precision, waited exactly long enough for Harry to untie the letter, and swept back out without so much as a backwards glance. No treat expected. No lingering. Gringotts owls were on the clock. The envelope was heavy parchment, cream-colored, sealed with the Gringotts crest in dark red wax. Harry turned it over. His name was written in angular, precise script. Mr. Harry James Potter, the smallest bedroom 4 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey, not unusual so far. But below his name in smaller text was something he'd never seen on any correspondence before. Ray. Estate of Lord Fleamont and Lady Euphemia Potter, final probate completion. Ray. Vault 687 Trust, Vault 712 Family, Vault 3 Ancient/Peverell Notice. Previous correspondence returned undelivered. Redirect notice filed by APWB Dumbledore, expired 6/1996. No current redirect active. Delivering to primary beneficiary directly. Harry read it twice, then a third time. Previous correspondence returned undelivered. Redirect notice filed by Dumbledore. He sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress springs creaking under him, and broke the seal. The letter inside was 3 pages long, written in gobbledygook-accented English that was dense with legal terminology. Harry read it slowly, carefully, the way Hermione had always told him to read important things and he'd always ignored because who had time for that? He had time now. 3 weeks of nothing but time. The gist was this. Fleamont and Euphemia Potter had died in 1979. Their will had entered probate, the magical legal process for settling estates, because their sole heir, James Potter, had died before the probate was fully completed, and because James's own heir, Harry, had been a minor placed with Muggle guardians. The process had been frozen. A magical guardian, Dumbledore, had been appointed to oversee the estate on Harry's behalf. That was all normal enough, Harry supposed. But the second page was where his hands started shaking. The probate had been completed in 1991, the year Harry turned 11. At that point, by Goblin and Wizarding law, the estate should have been fully transferred to Harry's control, held in trust until his majority with regular accounting statements sent annually. Vault 687, his trust vault, the one Hagrid had taken him to that first time, was supposed to be pocket money. a fraction of the estate set aside for school expenses. There were two other vaults. Vault 712, the Potter family vault, contained. Harry scanned the figures and then went back and read them again because he was certain he'd miscounted the zeros. A fortune that made the trust vault look like the spare change jar Uncle Vernon kept on his dresser. Gold, artifacts, property deeds, heirloom items, books, and something listed as sundry magical objects of historical significance. And then there was Vault 3, just 3, one of the first vaults Gringotts had ever created. The Peverell vault, tied to the Potter line by blood inheritance, which hadn't been opened in over 200 years. Its contents were listed simply as unknown. Last inventory predates current record-keeping system. The third page was an apology. Not a groveling apology, goblins didn't grovel, but a stiff, formal acknowledgement that Gringotts had, at the direction of Harry's magical guardian, been redirecting all estate correspondence away from Harry for the past 5 years. The redirect authorization had been signed by Albus Dumbledore, and it had expired on Harry's 16th birthday, June 24th, 3 weeks ago. No renewal had been filed. Whether that was Dumbledore's oversight or intentional, the letter didn't speculate. Gringotts didn't speculate. They dealt in facts and gold. The final paragraph invited Harry to visit Gringotts at his earliest convenience to review and claim his full inheritance, execute pending testamentary documents, and assume stewardship of all Potter Peverell holdings. Harry set the letter down on his knee and stared at the wall across from him. Uncle Vernon was snoring down the hall. Aunt Petunia's alarm clock would go off in 3 hours. The streetlight outside painted an orange stripe across the floor. 5 years. Dumbledore had been intercepting his mail from Gringotts for 5 years. Not just keeping him in the dark about a prophecy, keeping him in the dark about his own family. Harry stood up. He dressed quickly, pulled on trainers, grabbed his wand from under his pillow and his invisibility cloak from the bottom of his trunk. He stuffed the Gringotts letter into his back pocket and paused just long enough to scrawl a note, "Gone to London. Back later. Don't touch my stuff," and left it on his pillow in case anyone from the Order came checking. Then he stopped, thought about it. The Order, Dumbledore's people. Watching the house, watching him, keeping him penned in at Privet Drive for his protection, the same way Dumbledore had kept him penned in the dark about everything else. Harry pulled the invisibility cloak over himself and went to the window. He could see Mundungus Fletcher asleep in the front garden behind a hydrangea bush, the glow of a cigarette dying between his fingers. Some protection. He crept downstairs, avoiding the third step from the bottom that creaked, slipped out the back door and walked 3 streets over to Magnolia Crescent where the night bus had picked him up once before. He pulled off the cloak, stuck out his wand hand, and waited. The purple triple-decker bus slammed into existence with a bang that set off a car alarm. "Welcome to the night bus," Stan Shunpike started, but Harry was already climbing on, pressing gold into his hand. "Diagon Alley, fast as you can." Stan looked at him, looked at the scar, opened his mouth. "Not tonight, Stan." Stan closed his mouth and nodded. Even he could read a room. The bus launched itself through the dark English countryside, bouncing between locations like a pinball, and Harry sat in the back and didn't hold on to anything and didn't flinch when they took corners that should have been physically impossible. He was thinking about a vault he'd never known existed, and a ring of interception Dumbledore had thrown around his life. And the more he thought about it, the less he felt like the grieving boy who'd been lying on that bed, and the more he felt like something harder. Something with edges. London materialized outside the windows at 3:30 in the morning. The leaky cauldron was dark, but the door opened when Harry pushed it. It always opened for witches and wizards. Tom the barkeep was asleep in a chair behind the bar, a cleaning rag still in his hand. Harry passed through silently, tapped the bricks in the back alley and stepped through into Diagon Alley. It was deserted. Shops shuttered, street empty, the faintest pre-dawn glow touching the crooked rooftops. But Gringotts never closed. Gringotts never slept. The white marble building sat at the end of the alley like a clenched fist, torches burning on either side of the bronze doors, and Harry walked straight toward it with his shoulders back and his jaw set. The goblin at the door was not the usual daytime attendant. This one was older, heavily scarred across one cheek, and carried a short spear that wasn't ceremonial. "The bank is open for business," the goblin said, eyeing Harry, "though we see few wizards at this hour." "I have an appointment," Harry said, which wasn't exactly true, but he held up the letter with the Gringotts seal. The goblin examined it, looked at Harry, looked at the letter again, and something shifted in his expression. Not friendliness, goblins didn't do friendliness, but a sharpening of interest. "Mr. Potter, yes, come in." He was led not to the main hall but down a side corridor Harry had never noticed before, and then down a staircase, and then down another staircase, and then through a door that required the goblin to press his palm against it and mutter something in gobbledygook. The corridor beyond was older. The marble gave way to rough-hewn stone. The torches were replaced by something that glowed from within the walls themselves, some kind of embedded crystal that cast pale blue light. They arrived at an office. It was surprisingly large, carved from dark stone, furnished with a desk the size of a dining table and shelves that reached the ceiling, stuffed with ledgers and scrolls. Behind the desk sat a goblin who was either very old or very weathered. It was hard to tell with goblins, wearing spectacles with rectangular lenses and a waistcoat of dark burgundy. "Account Manager Ironclaw," the guard announced. "Mr. Harry Potter." "Sit down, Mr. Potter," Ironclaw said without looking up. He was writing in a ledger with a quill that moved so fast it blurred. He finished whatever he was writing, set the quill down, and looked at Harry over his spectacles. "You received our letter." "I received a letter. I gather there were supposed to be more." Something that might have been a smile crossed Ironclaw's face. On a goblin, it looked like a knife being unsheathed. "Yes, considerably more. Please understand, Mr. Potter, that Gringotts complied with the redirect authorization because it was legally filed by your magical guardian. We were not pleased to do so. The Potter accounts are among the oldest in this bank. We have served your family for over 700 years. We do not enjoy being placed between a client and their gold. But you did it anyway. The law required it. The law no longer requires it. Your magical guardianship terminated on your 16th birthday. You are, in the eyes of goblin law, if not yet wizarding law, the rightful head of your house." Ironclaw opened a drawer and placed a thick folder on the desk. "Shall we begin?" they began. It took 2 hours. Ironclaw walked Harry through everything. The trust vault he already knew about, the family vault he hadn't, the investments and properties, a cottage in Godric's Hollow, derelict, a manor house in Wales under preservation charms, a flat in London's magical quarter that had been rented out for decades, generating income Harry had never seen. The Potter fortune was old money, built over centuries by clever witches and wizards who'd had a knack for potions, spell crafting, and being on the right side of history more often than not. His grandfather, Fleamont, had quadrupled the family gold with a single invention, Sleekeasy's hair potion. Harry almost laughed at that. Almost. "And the Peverell vault?" Harry asked. Ironclaw's quill stopped moving. He set it down and removed his spectacles, polishing them with a cloth, a gesture Harry suspected was more about buying thinking time than cleaning lenses. "Vault 3, Ironclaw said slowly, "is unusual. It was established at the founding of Gringotts itself. The Peverell family were among the first depositors. When the direct Peverell line merged with the Potters through marriage, Iolanthe Peverell to Hardwin Potter sometime in the 13th century, custody of the vault transferred. It has been Potter property ever since, but no Potter has opened it in by our records 217 years. Why not? Because the vault has its own protections, goblin wards and wizard wards layered together. An unusual arrangement we agreed to only because of the age and significance of the account. The vault can only be opened by a Potter of direct blood descent who is also the last of their line." Harry stared at him. The last of the line. The failsafe was designed to be accessed only in times of existential threat to the family. As long as multiple Potters lived, the vault remained sealed. When your father died, you became the last. When you turned 16 and your guardianship ended, Ironclaw spread his hands. "The vault has been waiting for you, Mr. Potter, for a very long time." Harry sat with that for a moment. The The last Potter, the very last one. The thought sat in his chest like a stone. Take me down. Ironclaw looked at him for a long moment, then nodded and stood. He was barely 4 feet tall but carried himself like a general. He led Harry out of the office and deeper. Deeper than Harry had ever been in Gringotts. Deeper than the high-security vaults. Deeper than the dragon-guarded levels. The cart ride was long and steep, plunging through tunnels carved from raw bedrock, past underground rivers that glowed faintly with bioluminescent something or other, past caverns where Harry could feel magical pressure pushing against his skin like the change before a thunderstorm. They stopped at the very bottom. The vault door wasn't gold or bronze or any kind of metal Harry recognized. It was stone. Plain, dark, ancient stone with a single handprint carved into its center. Blood and magic, Ironclaw said. Press your hand to the stone, the vault will judge you. Judge me. Peverell magic is not goblin magic, Mr. Potter. I cannot tell you what will happen. No living goblin has seen this vault opened. Harry looked at the door. He could feel something behind it, a pressure, a presence, like standing outside a room where someone was holding their breath. He pressed his hand to the stone. Pain, sharp and bright, like a needle driven through his palm. He felt blood well against the stone, felt magic surge up through him in a way he'd never experienced. Not from his wand, not through learned spells, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere in the marrow of his bones, the architecture of his blood. The stone drank it, tasted it, considered it. Then the door dissolved. Not opened, dissolved, turning to mist that swirled and parted like curtains. The vault beyond was not what Harry expected. No mountains of gold, no jeweled cups, no glittering artifacts. The chamber was circular, maybe 30 feet across and mostly empty. The walls were covered in carved runes that pulsed with faint light. Some he recognized from ancient runes class, most he didn't. The floor was smooth stone with a single channel cut into it, spiraling from the door to the center in a pattern that reminded Harry of a nautilus shell. At the center of the spiral sat a stone pedestal. On the pedestal sat a ring. It was simple. A band of dark metal, not gold, not silver, something older, set with a black stone that had a strange, smoky depth to it. The stone wasn't cut or faceted. It was smooth, round, like a river pebble, and when Harry stepped closer, he could see something turning slowly inside it like a galaxy seen from very far away. Is that? Harry started and then stopped, because he could feel it. The ring was pulling at him. Not physically, not like a magnet, but the way a campfire pulls at someone who's been out in the cold. An ache to be closer. Ironclaw had not followed him inside. Harry glanced back and saw the goblin standing at the threshold, his expression unreadable. What is it? Harry asked. It is the heart of the Peverell legacy, Ironclaw said. Beyond that I cannot say. It is not goblin-made and it is not for goblins to know. Harry turned back to the ring. He thought about being careful. He thought about how every magical object he'd ever encountered on impulse had tried to kill him, possess him, or ruin his life in some creative new way. He thought about how Dumbledore would probably tell him to wait, to study it, to be cautious. He picked it up. It was warm. Not hot, warm, like it had been sitting in someone's hand just moments ago. The metal was heavier than it looked, and the smoky stone seemed to pulse once as his fingers closed around it. And then something happened that Harry had no framework for. The runes on the walls blazed to life, all of them, all at once, bright enough that Harry threw up his arm to shield his eyes. The spiral channel in the floor filled with light that raced from the door to the center, and Harry felt the ring vibrate in his hand like a tuning fork struck against something fundamental. A voice filled the chamber. Not a sound exactly, more like a thought pressed into his mind from the outside, in a language he didn't speak but somehow understood. Blood of our blood, last of the line, the covenant wakes. Harry slid the ring onto his finger. The world went white. He was standing somewhere, nowhere. A space without walls or floor or sky, just luminous blankness that stretched in every direction. He could feel his body, feel his heartbeat, feel the ring on his finger pulsing in time with his blood. But there was nothing else. Then she was there. A woman. Tall, taller than Harry, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes that were gray-green and ancient and furious. She wore robes that were centuries out of style, heavy, layered, embroidered with symbols Harry half recognized from the vault walls. Her face was sharp-boned and proud and beautiful in the way a sword is beautiful. She looked at him and her expression crumbled. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, you are so young." Harry's wand was in his hand without conscious thought. "Who are you?" "I am Iolanthe," she said, and her voice was rough, accented in a way Harry couldn't place. "Iolanthe Peverell, who is wife to Hardwin Potter. I am the first mother of your house, and I am—" Her voice broke. She pressed a hand to her mouth. "I am so sorry that it has come to this, that you are the last." Harry didn't lower his wand. "You're dead." "Very much so. Nearly 800 years." She smiled through what looked like tears. "Could spirits cry?" "The ring, child. The ring was my working, my greatest and most desperate magic. I wove it when my blood first joined the Potter line, a covenant anchored to love and blood and the fear every mother carries that she will not be there when her children need her most." She stepped closer. Harry didn't step back. "When the last Potter stands alone, truly alone, with no family left to protect him, the ring calls us home. Every witch who ever loved a Potter man, every mother, wife, lover, protector, we come." "We," Harry said. Iolanthe smiled. It was fierce and proud and aching. "We." The white space fractured and they came. One at a time at first, then in pairs, then in groups, stepping out of the luminous nothing like travelers emerging from fog. Dozens of them, women of every age and era, medieval robes and Elizabethan gowns and Victorian dress and modern wizarding fashion and things so old Harry couldn't put a century to them. Some were young, barely older than him. Some were ancient, bent-backed and white-haired. All of them looked at Harry, and every single face carried the same expression: recognition. As if they'd been waiting for him specifically, even though most of them had died centuries before he was born. A stout woman with wild copper hair and a face full of freckles pushed to the front of the crowd. She was wearing an apron over patched robes, and she looked like she'd been interrupted in the middle of cooking something. Her eyes swept over Harry, his too thin frame, the shadows under his eyes, the scar, and her face twisted. "Euphemia Potter," she said, and her voice was pure warmth wrapped around an iron core. "Your grandmother, and you look half-starved, so someone is going to answer for that." A tall woman with black hair and the unmistakable bone structure of the Black family stepped forward next. She was elegant and controlled and looked like she could flay someone with a word. "Doria Potter, born Doria Black. Your great-grandmother." She looked Harry up and down. "You have James's face, and Lily's eyes, and the look of a boy who's been told too many lies by people he trusted." Harry lowered his wand slightly. "You knew my dad." Doria's expression softened a fraction. "James was my grandson. I died when he was 12. She stopped herself, pressed her lips together. "There will be time for that, but not here, not now. The ring is pulling us through, but the space is unstable. We need to anchor." A massive woman in battle-scarred leather stepped out of the crowd. She was nearly 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with a long scar running from her temple to her jaw and arms that looked like they could bend iron bars. Her robes were archaic, covered in protective runes stitched directly into the fabric. "Viola Potter, 17th century, fought the Goblin Rebellion of 1612. She cracked her knuckles. "I'll need to see you fight before I can teach you, but from the look of you, we're starting from the ground up." "Oi," Harry said, because he'd fought Voldemort 4 times and 100 Dementors and a basilisk and a dragon, and he wasn't going to stand here and be called a beginner by a ghost. Viola grinned. It was terrifying. "Good, you've got spine. We'll build on that." A slight woman with dark skin and silver-streaked hair drifted forward. She moved differently from the others, lighter, as if gravity had less claim on her. Her eyes were extraordinary, deep brown with flecks of gold that actually seemed to move. "Catherine Potter, born Catherine Adami, Muggle-born, class of 1847. Her accent was London, refined but with rough edges. "I married your great-great-great-grandfather during a time when half the wizarding world would rather have seen me dead for the crime of my parentage. So believe me when I say I understand what you're up against better than most." And they kept coming. More and more, filling the white space until Harry lost count. Some introduced themselves. Some just looked at him and cried or smiled or both. A woman in robes so old they were practically rags, Marge, wife of Linfrid of Stinchcombe, the oldest of them all, stood at the back and watched him with eyes that glowed like banked embers, and when she spoke, it was in a language that sounded like Welsh but older, and yet Harry understood her perfectly. "Little Wren," she said, "so small, so full of thunder." "How am I understanding you?" Harry asked. "The ring translates between blood," Iolanthe said. "We are family. Language is no barrier." Harry stood in the middle of this impossible gathering, surrounded by the accumulated love and fury and knowledge of 1,000 years of Potter women, and felt something crack inside him. Not break, crack open, like a seed splitting its shell. He wasn't alone. For the first time in his life, in his entire miserable cupboard under the stairs, you're a burden sent back to the Dursleys every summer life, he was not alone. He had family. Dead family, granted. Spirit family, technically. But family who knew him, who had been woven into the magic of his blood, who had come because the ring had called and the call meant a Potter was in danger, and every single one of them had answered. Euphemia pushed through to him and wrapped her arms around him. Harry stiffened and then felt it. Warmth. Actual physical warmth, like a hug, like being held, like someone's arms around him who genuinely, deeply, unreservedly loved him. "I've got you," she murmured. "We've all got you. Should have been here sooner, should have been here from the start." "How?" Harry managed, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "How is this possible? The resurrection stone can bring back the dead, but not like this." Iolanthe shook her head. "The resurrection stone was my grandfather Cadmus's folly. He wanted to drag the dead back to the living world, a perversion, a cruelty. The dead who return through the stone are pale and suffering and long for release. My ring does not drag anyone back. The ring is an invitation anchored in love. We are not forced here. Every woman you see chose to answer the call. We are not alive, but we are present. We can think, speak, remember. And with enough of your magic to anchor us, we can act," Viola finished, and the gleam in her eyes was distinctly dangerous. "Act as in, cast spells," Doria said crisply. "Interact with the physical world. Fight if necessary, advise, teach, protect." Her dark eyes locked onto his. "We are the Potter legacy made manifest, Harry. And from what I have seen in the brief moments since waking, the state of you, the state of our family's affairs, the state of the world." Her voice went cold as winter iron. "There is much to do." The white space shuddered. Cracks appeared in the luminous nothing, and through them Harry could see the vault, dark stone, carved runes, the pedestal where the ring had sat. "The anchor is settling," Iolanthe said. "We will return to the physical world with you, but understand only you can see and hear us unless we choose to manifest visually. Manifestation requires more of your magic. A few of us at a time can manifest fully. All of us at once would drain you to unconsciousness." "Right," Harry said. "So Invisible Advisory Council, with the option to terrify people when needed." "Precisely," Doria said, and the satisfaction in her voice was pure black family. The white space collapsed, and Harry was standing in the vault again, the ring on his finger, the runes on the walls slowly dimming. He blinked. Everything looked the same, but he could feel them, all of them, pressing softly against his consciousness like hands against the other side of a curtain. Present, watching, waiting. "We are here," Iolanthe's voice whispered in his mind. "Always." Harry flexed his hand. The ring sat on his finger as if it had always been there, and his magic felt different. Deeper, like a well he'd been drawing from his whole life had suddenly had its bottom drop out, revealing an aquifer beneath. He walked out of the vault. Ironclaw was still standing at the threshold, and the moment Harry emerged, the goblin's eyes went wide. Actually wide. Harry had never seen a goblin show surprise before, and it was startling on that sharp-featured face. "Mr. Potter," Ironclaw said slowly. "What did you find?" "Family," Harry said. Ironclaw looked at the ring on Harry's hand, then at something Harry couldn't see, or rather, something Harry could feel but not see from his own perspective. Ironclaw was looking at the space around Harry, the space where the spirits stood invisible to humans, but apparently not to goblins. The old goblin's eyes tracked across the vault entrance as if watching a crowd file through. "Goblins see what is there," Ironclaw murmured. "Not what is presented. I see many, very many." "You can see them." Outlines, impressions, enough to know that you have not come out of that vault alone. Ironclaw straightened. When he spoke again, his voice carried a formal weight that hadn't been there before. The nation of Gringotts recognizes the activation of the Peverell Covenant. The Potter accounts are hereby released in full to the stewardship of Harry James Potter, head of the ancient and most noble house of Potter Peverell. He paused. Is there anything further you require this morning, Lord Potter? Lord Potter, Harry thought, and it felt strange and heavy and right all at once. Not Lord Potter, Doria corrected in his mind, her tone sharp with precision. Lord Potter Peverell. There is a difference, and you will insist on it. The Peverell name carries weight in circles that have forgotten the Potters exist. Yes, Harry said to Ironclaw. I want a full accounting of every transaction, withdrawal, deposit, and correspondence related to my vault since October 31, 1981. Every redirect, every authorization Dumbledore signed, every nut that moved without my knowledge. Ironclaw's knife smile returned. With pleasure, Lord Potter Peverell, and I'll need to make some withdrawals. Gold, and I saw books listed among the family vault contents. An extensive library, centuries of accumulated texts, many of them unique. I want access to those, and property keys for the London flat and the Welsh manor. It will be arranged within the hour. Shall I have the accounting files sent to you? Harry thought about Privet Drive, about the Order Watchers, about Dumbledore's intercepts. Number, hold them here. I'll come back for them. But Ironclaw, I want one thing made absolutely clear in your records. Sir, no one accesses my accounts but me. No magical guardian, no chief warlock, no headmaster, no anyone. If Albus Dumbledore walks in here and asks to see so much as my bank balance, you tell him nothing. Are we clear? Ironclaw looked at Harry with an expression that was as close to respect as Harry had ever seen on a goblin's face. Crystal clear, Lord Potter Peverell. If you'll follow me, we can process the vault access while the accounting is prepared. The next hour was a blur of paperwork and goblin efficiency. Harry accessed the family vault, which was exactly the mountain of gold and artifacts he'd expected the Peverell vault to be, and withdrew a substantial amount into an enchanted pouch that held more than it should. He collected a ring of keys, each labeled in cramped goblin script, for the various Potter properties, and he spent 20 minutes in the vault's library section, running his hands along the spines of books that ranged from leather-bound medieval grimoires to relatively modern texts on advanced magic. Take the one on the left, dark blue cover, Viola said. That's Aldrich Potter's combat manual. 17th century, but the fundamentals haven't changed. And the green one beside it, Catherine added. It's a theoretical framework for ward crafting that would make Hogwarts protections look like a garden fence. The red one, Marge whispered, and even in his mind her voice sounded like wind through old trees. The red one is mine. Healing, herbs and blood and earth magic. Old ways. Harry took all three, and a dozen more the spirits pointed out, shrinking them to fit in his pockets with a charm Doria fed him, one that wasn't taught at Hogwarts, sharper and more elegant than the standard shrinking charm. He emerged from Gringotts as dawn broke over Diagon Alley. The street was still mostly empty, a few early shop owners unlocking their doors, a ministry worker hurrying past with a coffee, a hag haggling with a goblin over something wrapped in cloth. Nobody paid Harry much attention. Without his school robes and with his hair in its usual mess, he was just another teenager in jeans and trainers. But the goblins at the door were watching, both of them. And as Harry walked past, they did something that stopped him in his tracks. They bowed. Not the curt nod goblins gave to valued customers. A full bow from the waist, their spears held across their bodies. A warrior's salute. Harry stared at them, and the nearest one met his eyes and said, in gobbledygook, a phrase that Iolanthe translated instantly in his mind. Walk well, ring-bearer. The old packs remember your blood. Harry nodded back, a deep, respectful nod, because whatever Binns droned on about in history of magic, Harry was learning very quickly that goblin respect was something you didn't waste and walked on. The night bus was too conspicuous for the return trip. Harry ducked into the leaky cauldron, now stirring with early morning life, and took the flue to Mrs. Fig's house, which was networked to the system because Dumbledore had connected it years ago. Mrs. Fig was asleep upstairs, and her cats gave Harry baleful looks but didn't raise an alarm. He slipped out her back door and walked the 4 streets to Privet Drive. Mundungus was gone, probably sloped off at dawn. Harry walked through the front door of number 4 like he owned the place, which he supposed he'd never done before and which felt different now in a way he couldn't quite articulate. He went up to his room, shut the door, sat on the bed and said quietly, "All right. I can feel you all. How does this work?" The spirits manifested. Not all of them, the full weight of every spirit at once would have been impossible. But the key ones, the ones who had spoken to him in the vault, shimmered into visibility in the cramped, ridiculous bedroom of a house that was everything the Potter legacy was not. Euphemia appeared first, and her reaction to the room was immediate and visceral. She looked at the broken things, the bars on the window from second year that had never been fully repaired, the cat flap in the door where food had been pushed through during his imprisonment, the thin mattress, and the locks on the outside of the door. "What," she said very quietly, very carefully, "is this?" "My room," Harry said. "It's better than the cupboard under the stairs. That's where I slept until I was 11. The temperature in the room dropped so sharply Harry could see his breath. Euphemia's manifestation flickered, and for an instant she looked less like a kind grandmother and more like a force of nature wearing a grandmother's face. "A cupboard," she repeated. "Under the stairs." "Yeah." Doria materialized beside the window, examined the remnants of the bars, and her eyes went flat and dark. "Dumbledore placed you here with muggles in a cupboard. There was a blood ward, my mum's sacrifice. I know about Lily's sacrifice," Doria said, and her voice could have frozen fire. "I watched it happen from the other side. The love magic she invoked was extraordinary, but it could have been anchored to any blood relative's home. It didn't have to be this one. It didn't have to be people who starved you and locked you in a cupboard. There weren't other." "There were," Ireland said, manifesting by the door, her ancient robes incongruous against the bland suburban wallpaper. "The Potter line has extended family through marriages. The Longbottoms, the Bones, distant connections but enough for blood wards. Dumbledore chose this house because these people would keep you small, ignorant, grateful for any scrap of the magical world he deigned to give you." Harry opened his mouth to argue and then closed it, because he'd thought the same thing, hadn't he? In his worst moments, in his angriest moments, he'd thought exactly that. Viola shimmered into view by the closet and immediately looked bored by the surroundings. The boy doesn't need a history lesson about his suffering. He lived it. What he needs is a plan. She looked at Harry with those scarred warrior's eyes. "You've inherited the ring. You've claimed the vaults. You've got a dark lord who wants you dead and a puppet master who wants you compliant. What are you going to do about it?" Harry looked at them, these women, his blood, his legacy. Dead for decades or centuries, but more real and present and honest than almost anyone he'd known in life. "I'm going to stop playing other people's games," he said. Viola smiled. "Good answer. But I need to know things first. The prophecy Dumbledore told me after the ministry. Neither can live while the other survives. Voldemort has Horcruxes, I'm pretty sure of it, based on the diary and some things Dumbledore's hinted at." The temperature shifted again, but not from Euphemia this time. Ireland's expression went sharp and cold. "Soul magic," she said. "Cadmus's obsession. He didn't just make the resurrection stone, he was trying to anchor himself to life permanently. The other 2 brothers stopped him before he succeeded, but the theory survived. Fragmenting the soul to avoid death." She shook her head, disgusted. "This Voldemort, he found the old knowledge." "How many?" Doria asked. "How many fragments?" "I don't know. Dumbledore's been researching it but hasn't told me everything. I know about the diary, I destroyed that in second year. And I think," Harry paused, "the connection between me and Voldemort, the scar. Sometimes I think it's more than just a curse scar." Silence. The spirits looked at each other. Marge, who had manifested in the corner as a barely there shimmer that smelled like herbs and rain-soaked earth, made a low sound in her throat. "Let me see," she said, and drifted closer. Her hand, translucent, faintly luminous, reached for Harry's forehead. He held still. Her fingers brushed his scar, and Harry felt something he'd never felt before. A gentle probing, infinitely careful, like someone opening a door a crack to peek inside without disturbing what was within. Marge's eyes widened, then narrowed, then blazed with an anger that was older and wilder than anything Harry had seen from the others. She spoke rapidly in her ancient tongue, and even with the ring's translation, the concepts were complex enough that Harry only caught fragments. Splinter, lodged, parasitic, feeding. There is a piece of him in you, Ironclaw said, translating more fully. A fragment of the Dark Lord's soul, lodged in your scar. Marge says it's been there since infancy. It's been feeding on your magic, suppressing it, like a weed choking a garden. The room went very, very quiet. Can you get it out? Harry asked. His voice was steady. He was proud of that. Marge studied him, those ember-bright eyes searching his face. Then she spoke, and Ironclaw translated again. Not easily, not quickly, but yes. The old ways knew about soul parasites. They were not common, but they existed. Marge says, Ironclaw paused, listening. She says the fragment is tangled into your own magic like thorns in a vine. Pulling it out carelessly would damage you. But if we unwind it slowly, carefully, feeding you the old healing rites to strengthen what's yours and weaken what's his, yes, we can remove it without killing you. Without killing me, Harry echoed. Was that the other option? Another exchange of glances. Doria answered this one blunt as a hammer. Dumbledore knows about the soul fragment. He's known for years, I'd wager, and his plan, whatever it is, probably involves you dying to destroy it. Harry sat very still. The crack in the ceiling stared back at him like a scar. Right, he said after a long moment. Right. So the plan is, remove the soul piece without dying, find and destroy the rest of the Horcruxes, deal with Voldemort permanently, and have a stern conversation with Albus Dumbledore about his management style. Euphemia let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You sound like your father. I hope so. Viola cracked her knuckles again, a sound like rocks striking. Training starts now, today. You've got how long until you go back to school? About 2 months. 2 months. Viola considered this. I've trained soldiers in less, but you're not starting from nothing. You fought a Dark Lord at 14 and survived. That's not skill, that's bone-deep instinct, an instinct I can work with. She looked around the tiny bedroom. Not here, obviously. We'll need space. And wards, heavy wards, so nobody detects what we're doing. The Welsh property, Harry said. The manor. Ironclaw gave me the keys. Tomorrow, Doria said firmly. Tonight you rest. Eat something. You look like a scarecrow with delusions of wizard. Thanks, Gran, Doria blinked. Then, for the first and possibly only time in her formidable existence, she looked like she might cry. She mastered herself instantly, but Harry saw it, and the spirits saw it, and something warm and solid settled into the space between them that hadn't been there before. Gran, she repeated quietly. Yes, I suppose I am. Harry pulled the shrunken books from his pockets and began resizing them, lining them up on his desk. He'd start reading tonight. Tomorrow he'd go to the manor. In 2 months he'd go back to Hogwarts, but not as the boy who'd left. Downstairs, Uncle Vernon's alarm went off, and the house began its morning routine of stomping and complaining and frying things. Harry could hear Dudley's television, Aunt Petunia's sharp voice, the mundane machinery of a house that had been his prison for 15 years. He touched the ring on his finger. It pulsed warmth against his skin. We are here, the spirits whispered, all of them, a chorus that rang through his blood. Harry opened the first book, Aldrich Potter's Combat Manual, bound in dark blue leather, the pages yellowed but the text sharp and clear, and began to read. Outside, the sun came up over Little Winging. It was Tuesday morning, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. The Dursleys ate their breakfast and went about their business and never noticed that the boy in the smallest bedroom was quietly, methodically, irrevocably becoming something they could not have understood even if they'd tried. In 2 months, the wizarding world was going to meet the real Harry Potter. They had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Chapter 2. The Mothers War Council. Harry didn't sleep that night. Not because of nightmares. For the first time in weeks, Voldemort's presence in his mind had gone strangely quiet, muffled, as if something had been draped over the connection like a heavy cloth. Marge's doing, he suspected. The old healer had spent an hour with her translucent fingers hovering over his scar, murmuring in that ancient tongue, and when she'd finally pulled away, the constant low-grade headache Harry had carried for so long he'd forgotten it wasn't normal had simply stopped. He didn't sleep because he was reading. Aldrich Potter's combat manual was not what Harry expected. There were no spell lists, no neat diagrams of wand movements, none of the structured lesson plan format of Hogwarts textbooks. Instead, it read like a soldier's field journal, observations, anecdotes, hard-won insights scrawled in the margins of experience. Aldrich had fought goblins and dark wizards, and in one memorable chapter, something he called a wormshade that Harry was fairly certain no modern bestiary had ever catalogued. His writing was blunt, practical, and occasionally funny in a grim sort of way. The killing curse is feared because it cannot be shielded, Aldrich had written. This is a lie taught by lazy wizards. It cannot be shielded by a standard protego because protego was designed to deflect kinetic force, and the killing curse carries no kinetic force. It is pure intent made manifest. But intent can be redirected, absorbed, grounded. The old wardstones did this. A sufficiently dense patronus can absorb it, and physical matter, stone, metal, conjured objects, will block it as surely as a wall blocks an arrow. The wizard who stands still and tries to outspell a killing curse is a dead wizard. The wizard who moves, who conjures, who changes the shape of the battlefield, that wizard lives. Harry read that passage 3 times. Then he thought about the graveyard in 4th year, about hiding behind tombstones while Voldemort threw killing curses, and realized he'd stumbled onto the right strategy purely by accident. Aldrich Potter had codified it 400 years ago. Not by accident, Viola's voice said in his mind. She wasn't manifested. The spirits could communicate silently when they chose. Instinct, you fight like a Potter. You just don't know the theory behind what your blood already knows. Is that a compliment? Harry murmured, turning a page. It's an observation. Compliments are earned in training. The sky outside was shifting from black to deep blue when Harry closed the book and stretched. His back ached from sitting hunched over the desk, and his eyes were gritty, but his mind was buzzing with ideas. He'd read the combat manual cover to cover and started Catherine's ward-crafting text, which was dense but revelatory. The basic principle was simple. Modern wards were built in layers, each doing one thing. Ancient wards were woven, interlocking, each element strengthening every other, so that attacking one strand tightened the whole structure. It was the difference between a stack of boards and a woven basket. Harry stood, pulled on clean clothes, and looked around the room. The spirits were dormant, not gone, but resting in whatever state they occupied when not actively manifesting. He could feel them like embers banked in a hearth, warm and present. He went downstairs before the Dursleys woke. The kitchen was pristine. Aunt Petunia's obsessive cleaning left no surface unwiped, and Harry made himself breakfast for the first time in his life without worrying about whether the portions were too large or the noise too much. He scrambled 6 eggs, fried toast, made a pot of tea, and ate all of it at the kitchen table. He was still eating when Aunt Petunia came down. She stopped in the doorway, lips thinning at the sight of him at the table with a full plate. Harry looked at her and waited for the usual complaint. That's too many eggs. Those were for Dudley, who said you could use the good pan, and when it came, he simply said, "Number." Petunia blinked. "Excuse me. Number, I'm eating breakfast. When I'm done, I'll clean up, but I'm eating and you're not going to say anything about it." Something in his voice, or maybe something in his eyes, or maybe the way the kitchen light seemed to bend slightly around him in a way that had nothing to do with the morning sun, made Petunia take a step back. Her mouth worked silently. "What's gotten into you?" "I found out some things about my family," Harry said. "My real family. The one you've been pretending doesn't exist for 15 years. Did you know my grandparents were wealthy? Did you know I have a manor house?" Petunia's face went through several colors. She settled on a mottled pink. "Your mother's people were, my father's people, the Potters, an ancient and noble house. I have estates, Aunt Petunia, I have a fortune, I have a legacy that goes back 1,000 years, and I have been sleeping in a cupboard. Harry took a sip of tea. I'm not angry, I'm past angry. I'm just telling you how things are going to be for the next few days before I leave. I'm going to eat when I want, come and go as I please, and you and Vernon and Dudley are going to leave me alone. In exchange, I'll be out of your lives permanently by the end of the week. Deal? Petunia stared at him. Then she turned on her heel and walked out of the kitchen without a word. Harry heard her go upstairs and the bedroom door close firmly. Well handled, Doria said, her voice manifesting in his mind like a bell struck once, clean and clear. Though I would have been less polite. You would have hexed her, Euphemia said. I would have hexed the husband, her I would have simply terrified. Harry finished his breakfast, washed the dishes, and went back upstairs. He had letters to write, and they were going to be important ones. The first letter was to Gringotts. Short, formal, requesting that Ironclaw prepare the Welsh property, Potter Manor, as the deeds apparently called it, for immediate habitation. He didn't know what state it was in after decades of vacancy, but the goblins had mentioned preservation charms, and he trusted goblin magic to have held. The second letter was harder. Harry sat at his desk with a blank sheet of parchment and thought about what to say to Dumbledore. The spirits had opinions. Doria wanted a formal declaration of independence wrapped in legal language that would have made a solicitor weep. Viola wanted something short and threatening. Euphemia wanted Harry to express his feelings honestly. Catherine suggested a measured, strategic approach that revealed just enough to unsettle without exposing the full picture. Harry went with his gut. Professor Dumbledore, I know about the vaults. I know about the redirect. I know about quite a lot of things, actually, that you decided I shouldn't know. I've claimed my inheritance. All of it. I've assumed headship of the House of Potter Peverell. Gringotts has my instructions regarding account access. Yours has been revoked. I will return to Hogwarts in September because I believe my education matters, and because there are people there I care about. But I am no longer your ward, and I will no longer be managed, manipulated, or kept in the dark. We will talk when I'm ready, not before. Harry James Potter, Lord Potter Peverell. He read it over twice, changed one word, and sealed it. Hedwig had returned during the night and was perched on her cage, watching him with amber eyes that seemed to understand more than an owl should. Take this to Dumbledore, Harry said, tying the letter to her leg. Don't wait for a reply. Hedwig nipped his finger gently, affectionately, and launched out the window. Harry watched her go, a white shape growing smaller against the overcast sky. The third letter was to Neville Longbottom. This one was brief and careful. He didn't put anything in writing that could be intercepted and used, but he made it clear that things were changing and that Harry wanted to talk in person before the term started. Neville had been at the ministry. Neville had fought beside him. Neville was the other boy the prophecy could have been about, and Harry thought he deserved to be treated like the ally he'd proven himself to be rather than the afterthought everyone else seemed to consider him. The fourth letter surprised even Harry. He addressed it to the Office of Hereditary Seats, Wisengamot Administrative Services, Ministry of Magic, and in it, he formally notified the ministry that the House of Potter Peverell had an active head for the first time in 16 years, and that Lord Potter Peverell would be assuming his ancestral seat at the earliest opportunity. That will cause a stir, Doria said with obvious satisfaction. She had manifested at his shoulder to oversee the letter, and Harry could practically feel her approval radiating like warmth from a stove. The Potter seat on the Wisengamot has been vacant since your grandfather died. Various factions have been squabbling over its proxy vote for years. Dumbledore held it for a time, of course. Of course he did, Harry muttered. The Peverell seat is even more significant. It's one of the founding seats, established when the Wisengamot was first formed. It hasn't been active in centuries. When the ministry receives that letter, every political player in Britain is going to sit up very straight. Good, let them. He sent the ministry letter with a post owl from the local magical drop box, a hollow tree in the park 3 streets over that Mrs. Figg had shown him years ago, not that he'd understood what it was at the time. Then he went back to reading. Catherine's ward crafting text occupied him through the morning. The principles were fascinating. She described wards not as walls but as living structures, responsive and adaptive, drawing power from the ambient magic of a location and the intent of the caster. Modern ward crafts, she argued, had become formulaic. Learn the spell, cast it in the right pattern, power it with your own magic. Ancient wardcraft was more intuitive, more personal, and vastly more powerful because it worked with the magic of a place rather than imposing on it. She was brilliant, Ireland said quietly. She had manifested by the window, gazing out at the suburban street with an expression of mild bewilderment. The modern world clearly baffled her. Catherine understood theory the way most wizards understand breathing, effortlessly. And she was mocked for it because her blood wasn't pure enough for the establishment to take seriously. Sounds familiar, Harry said, more than you know. The Potters have a long history of marrying people the rest of the wizarding world looked down on. Muggle-borns, half-bloods, foreigners, magical creatures, we never cared much for purity politics. Ireland's mouth quirked. Probably why the family has always been so magically strong. Fresh blood, new perspectives, no inbreeding. Harry snorted. He thought of the Blacks, the Gaunts, the obsession with bloodline purity that had produced Voldemort himself, a half-blood who hated half-bloods, descended from a family so inbred they could barely function. The irony was thick enough to choke on. By mid-afternoon, Harry was restless. The books were valuable, but his body was itching for movement, and Viola's combat manual had lit a fire under him that reading alone couldn't satisfy. He went down to the back garden, a small, neat rectangle of lawn bordered by fences and Aunt Petunia's rose bushes, and stood in the middle of it, feeling slightly ridiculous. I can't exactly practice combat magic in the Dursleys' garden, he said. The Ministry will detect it, underage magic laws. Viola manifested beside him, arms crossed, scarred face skeptical. The trace detects magic performed by underage wizards, but it detects it through the wand. If you cast without a wand, I can't do wandless magic. You can't do controlled wandless magic. Every child does it accidentally. You've done it, the glass at the zoo, the hair that grew back overnight, the ant you inflated. Viola grinned at that last one. Wandless magic isn't a separate skill, it's the original skill. Wands are tools, amplifiers, focusers. Useful, yes, necessary. Nobody at Hogwarts does wandless magic. Dumbledore does occasionally, but Dumbledore is the most powerful wizard of his generation, and he uses wandless magic like a party trick. Lighting candles, summoning chairs. Viola's contempt was palpable. In my time, every battle mage could fight without a wand. Not as precisely, not as efficiently, but we could fight. The wand was for finesse. The body was for power. She stepped back and squared herself to him. We're not going to practice spells, not yet. We're going to practice moving. A wizard who can't move is a wizard who dies. Footwork, positioning, awareness of your surroundings. You don't need magic for that, and the Ministry can't track your feet. For 2 hours, Viola drilled him. It wasn't glamorous. There were no flashy spells, no dramatic dueling stances. She taught him how to move, how to shift his weight, how to pivot, how to make himself a smaller target, how to use the ground beneath him. She taught him how to fall without hurting himself and how to get up fast enough that falling didn't matter. She taught him to keep his eyes moving, to be aware of every angle, every object in his environment that could be used as cover or as a weapon. Harry was drenched in sweat within 30 minutes. His legs burned. His lungs ached. And Viola was relentless. Every time he slowed, she barked a correction. Every time he repeated a mistake, she made him do the sequence again from the beginning. She was a brutal teacher, but she was also, Harry realized, an extraordinarily clear one. She never used 2 words where one would do, and every instruction was specific and actionable. "You're fast," she said at the end, which he was learning was as close to praise as she got. "Your reflexes are good Quidditch, I assume." "Seeker," Harry panted, hands on his knees. "That explains it. You track movement well. Your weakness is your core. You're strong enough for your age, but you've been underfed for years, and it shows. We'll fix that with food and work." She looked at him with something approaching warmth. "You remind me of my husband, Thomas Potter. He was small too when I started training him, grew into himself." What happened to him? We fought side by side for 20 years and raised 4 children, and he died in bed at the age of 93. Viola's face softened for just a moment. A good death, a good life, that's what we're fighting to give you. Harry straightened up and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The scar was quiet. When can we start actual magic? When we get to the manor and I can ward a training ground so thoroughly that you could detonate a blasting curse without anyone noticing. Tomorrow, you said. Tomorrow. Then tonight we focus on your mind. Doria manifested on the garden bench, somehow managing to look perfectly composed on weather-stained wood, and regarded Harry with those cool black family eyes. Mental magic. Occlumency and legilimency. Snape attempted to teach you last year. Harry's jaw tightened. If you can call it teaching. He basically attacked my mind repeatedly and told me to stop him. Doria's expression didn't change, but the air around her dropped a few degrees. That is not teaching. That is assault wearing the mask of pedagogy. Severus Snape is a competent occlumens and a wretched instructor. She stood and walked toward him, gliding, really, her feet barely seeming to touch the grass. Occlumency is not about building walls. Walls can be broken. It is about organizing your mind so thoroughly that an intruder finds nothing useful even if they get in. Think of it as the difference between locking a door and redesigning the house so that every room leads to somewhere meaningless. That's actually a much better explanation than anything Snape said. Snape learned his occlumency from Voldemort's school of mental magic, which is built on dominance and force. The Black family method is built on subtlety and misdirection. Doria smiled thinly. We didn't survive for centuries in the most dangerous pure-blood circles by being strong. We survived by being clever. She spent the rest of the evening teaching him. Not practicing, there was no magical component to detect, just teaching. She explained the architecture of the mind, the way memories and emotions were stored, the anchor points that legilimency exploited. She taught him a meditative technique that was less about clearing the mind, Snape's useless instruction, and more about categorizing it, sorting thoughts into layers, with the surface layer containing whatever you wanted an intruder to find. You don't block them out, Doria said. You bore them. You let them in and show them nothing but tedium, grocery lists, weather, the texture of the carpet. No legilimens will dig deep if the surface is sufficiently uninteresting. They'll assume there's nothing to find. What about Voldemort? He's not just a legilimens, he's in my head through the scar. The scar connection is different. That requires a different approach. Doria exchanged a glance with Marge, who had appeared as a barely visible shimmer at the edge of the garden. Marge is working on that. The soul fragment creates a channel that standard occlumency can't close because it's not a mental pathway, it's a spiritual one. But the spirit's presence around you is already disrupting it. Have you noticed? Harry paused. The headache stopped, and I haven't had a vision since I put on the ring. The ring's magic is flooding your system with ancestral power. It's like, imagine the soul fragment as a parasite living in a stream. The stream has been small and manageable for years. Suddenly, the stream has become a river. The parasite is being overwhelmed. It's still there, but it's losing its grip. Is that why Voldemort's been quiet? Partly, but don't assume that will last. He'll notice the change eventually and he'll push harder. By then we need Marge's work to be further along. Harry nodded. His mind felt clearer than it had in months, maybe years. The constant background noise of Voldemort's emotions, the nightmares, the scar pains, all muffled, dampened, as if someone had wrapped the connection in thick wool. Uncle Vernon came home at 6, stomped through the house, and complained about dinner being late. Harry heard him through the floor and felt nothing. The man was irrelevant. In 24 hours, Harry would be gone from this house forever, and Vernon Dursley would never matter again. He ate dinner in his room, food he'd bought from a corner shop during a brief walk that afternoon, paid for with Muggle money he'd exchanged at Gringotts, and continued reading while the spirits rotated their manifestations, each one spending time with him, sharing knowledge, asking questions about the modern world, and occasionally arguing with each other in the rapid-fire way of family members who disagreed about everything except the things that mattered. Euphemia fussed over his eating, making him finish every bite. Catherine explained magical theory that made his head spin and then made perfect sense 20 minutes later. Ireland told him about the Peverell brothers, the real story, not the fairy tale from Beetle the Bard. They'd been talented, arrogant, and reckless. Antioch had been a bully with a genius for wand craft. Cadmus had been brilliant but obsessed with death to an unhealthy degree. And Ignatus, Harry's direct ancestor, had been the quiet one, the careful one, the one who understood that the greatest magic wasn't about power but about love and sacrifice. He made the cloak of invisibility not to hide from death, Ireland said, but to protect his children, to give them a way to survive when the world was dangerous. That was always the Peverell purpose, not to conquer death but to shelter life. And the ring, the one I'm wearing, not the resurrection stone, this ring is my own creation built from the same principles Ignatus used in the cloak. The cloak hides from death. The ring calls love back through death. They're mirrors of each other. Where's the actual resurrection stone? Ireland's face darkened. I don't know. It was lost centuries ago. Last I knew, it had been set into a ring, a different ring, and passed through the Gaunt family who are descended from Cadmus. By now it could be anywhere. Harry filed that away. The Gaunts, Voldemort's mother's family. If Voldemort had found the resurrection stone, he could figure that out later. Right now he needed sleep, even if his mind didn't want to stop racing. He lay back on the thin mattress and closed his eyes, and Euphemia began humming, a lullaby, old and simple, that she said she'd sung to James when he was small. The melody wound through Harry's consciousness like warm water, and for the first time in 3 weeks he slept without dreaming. Dawn came and Harry woke clear-headed and hungry. He ate enormously, another 6-egg breakfast, toast, fruit, a pint of milk under Euphemia's approving gaze. Then he packed. It didn't take long. He'd never had much. His trunk held his school things, the shrunken books from the vault, his firebolt, the invisibility cloak, and the Marauder's map. He threw in his few changes of clothes, all Dudley's cast-offs, which he intended to burn at the earliest opportunity, and locked the trunk. Hedwig was still out delivering the letter to Dumbledore, but she'd find him. She always did. He left a note for the Dursleys on the kitchen table. It said, "Gone, not coming back. Don't contact me. You won't be able to." He almost added something about the blood wards, about how his departure might leave them unprotected. But Doria had examined the house's magical structure the night before and declared the wards threadbare and nearly useless anyway. "Lily's sacrifice protected you," Doria had said. The wards Dumbledore added were supplementary at best. And frankly, after what these people did to you, I'm not inclined to worry about their safety. Harry walked out of number 4, Privet Drive, on a Wednesday morning in July, dragging his trunk behind him, and did not look back. Not once. The smallest bedroom, the cupboard under the stairs, the locks and the cat flap in the bars on the window, all of it receded behind him like a bad dream losing its grip in morning light. He walked to the hollow tree in the park and apparated. Not sidelong. Not flew. He apparated, which he had never done before, and which was supposed to require months of training and a ministry license. But Viola had walked him through the theory the previous evening. You've done accidental magic that's harder than apparition. The only thing stopping you is believing it's difficult. And Ireland had provided the magical framework, ancient and elegant, and Harry had felt the rightness of it in his bones. You wanted to be somewhere. You turned on the spot. You were there. The modern 3-step method taught at Hogwarts, destination, determination, deliberation, was an oversimplification of something that should have been instinctive. He landed in front of a wrought iron gate set into a stone wall that disappeared in both directions into overgrown hedgerow. Beyond the gate, a gravel drive wound up a gentle hillside toward a house that, even after decades of vacancy, made Harry's breath catch. Potter Manor was not enormous. It wasn't a castle or a palace, or one of those grotesque aristocratic piles that existed only to intimidate visitors. It was a sprawling, asymmetric, deeply beautiful house built from gray Welsh stone, with a slate roof and windows of varying sizes arranged in a pattern that suggested the building had grown organically over centuries. each generation adding a room or a wing as needed. Ivy covered the eastern wall. Rose bushes had gone wild around the front entrance, creating a thorny arch over the door. The grounds extended in every direction, gardens gone to seed, an orchard with old trees still heavy with early fruit, and beyond that, rolling Welsh countryside under a sky that was doing that thing Welsh skies do, where it's somehow raining and sunny at the same time. Harry touched the gate and it swung open, not creaking, not resisting, smoothly as if it had been waiting. He felt the wards like walking through a waterfall of warm air. They scanned him, tasted his blood, his magic, the ring on his finger, and then welcomed him. He felt it like an embrace. The house knew him. "Home," Iolanthe whispered, and there was such longing in her voice that Harry's chest ached. "I remember this place. Not this house, it's been rebuilt since my time, but this land, this magic. The Potters have lived on this ground for 800 years. Harry walked up the drive, through the wild roses, and pushed open the front door. Inside was dusty but intact. The preservation charms had done their work. No decay, no damage, just the accumulated dust of decades of emptiness. The entrance hall had stone floors and oak beams and a fireplace large enough to stand in. Doors led off in several directions, and a staircase curved upward to the upper floors. Everything was furnished, though the furniture was covered in white sheets that gave the rooms a ghostly quality. Harry pulled the sheet off the nearest piece of furniture, an armchair in the front room, and a cloud of dust billowed up. He sneezed. Then he raised his wand and said, "Scourgify." But what came out wasn't the standard cleaning charm he'd learned in first year. The magic that surged through his wand was broader, more powerful, and flavored with something that tasted of the house itself. Dust lifted from every surface in the room simultaneously, swirling into a concentrated ball near the ceiling, and then vanished. "The house is helping you," Catherine observed. She had manifested in the doorway, examining the walls with professional interest. "The wards are tied to the family magic. When a Potter casts inside these walls, the house amplifies the intent. Clever work. This is third-generation ward layering, at least. Someone spent a lifetime on this. Can I do the whole house like that? Push more power into it. The house will do the rest." Harry raised his wand and pushed. Magic flowed out of him in a wave that he felt roll through the entire building, through every room, up the staircase, into the attics, down into whatever cellars lay below. He felt dust lifting, sheets pulling themselves off furniture, windows clearing, air freshening. It was like the house was taking a deep breath after holding it for 40 years. When it was done, Harry was breathing hard but not exhausted. Before the ring, a working that large would have left him flat on his back. Now it was just effort, significant effort but manageable. He spent an hour exploring. The house had 8 bedrooms, a kitchen that made the Hogwarts kitchens look like a camping stove, a library that took up most of the second floor and contained hundreds of books that made the ones from the vault look like primers, a potions laboratory in the basement, and this made Viola literally shout with glee, a training room on the ground floor that was warded to contain any magic practiced within it. "Fleamont added this," Euphemia said, manifesting in the training room with a soft smile. "My husband was a duelist in his youth. Quite good, actually. Won the All-Britain Championship twice before he retired to focus on the hair potion business." She touched the wall. "We were happy here. James grew up in this house, took his first steps on these floors, flew his first broom in the orchard." Harry stood in the room where his father had grown up and felt something huge and complicated moving through him. Loss and love and anger and gratitude all braided together. Why did they leave? The war. The first war against Voldemort. Fleamont and I were too old to fight by then. We died of dragon pox in 79 within days of each other. Euphemia's voice was steady but her eyes were bright. James and Lily went into hiding afterward. Dumbledore put them under the Fidelius at Godric's Hollow. They never came back here. Why Godric's Hollow? Why not here? These wards are stronger than anything Dumbledore could cast at a cottage, yes. I've wondered about that for a very long time. Euphemia's warmth flickered, showing the steel beneath. Dumbledore wanted them somewhere he controlled, somewhere he had set up. Not somewhere the Potter family magic would have warned them the moment a threat approached. Harry let that sink in. Added it to the growing list of things Dumbledore had to answer for, but not now. Now there was work to do. Viola claimed the training room immediately and had Harry back to physical drills by noon. This time, with proper wards containing the space, she allowed magic. And allowed was perhaps the wrong word, she demanded it. Cast at me, she said, standing across the room in a ready stance. Anything, everything, don't hold back. You're a spirit, I don't want to, we're anchored to your magic, boy. Your spells can't destroy us. At worst you'll disrupt my manifestation for a few minutes. Now cast. Harry cast. Stunners, disarming charms, reductor curses, the standard dueling repertoire he'd built over 5 years at Hogwarts and a year of Dumbledore's army. Viola dodged some, blocked others, and critiqued everything. Too slow. You're announcing your spells by shifting your weight before you cast. Any trained fighter reads that. Feet first, then wand, and don't telegraph which direction. Your stupefy is textbook perfect and textbook predictable. Vary the timing. Half power, full power, delayed release, keep your opponent guessing. Good reducto, but why are you aiming at me? Aim at the floor under me, the ceiling above me. A fighter can dodge a spell. They can't dodge an explosion of stone shrapnel. It was brutal, it was relentless, and it was the best combat education Harry had ever received. By comparison, the DA had been a study group. Moody's teaching had been good but theoretical. Viola was the real thing. A woman who had spent 20 years fighting and surviving and knew the difference between dueling and killing. After 2 hours, Harry was on the floor, gasping, drenched in sweat, with a split lip from a piece of conjured stone he'd failed to dodge. Viola stood over him, not even breathing hard because she didn't breathe, and nodded once. You're raw, sloppy, predictable, she paused. And you have more raw power than any Potter I've seen since Aldrich himself. You just don't know what to do with it. That change is starting now. Tomorrow, Euphemia said firmly, manifesting by the door with her arms crossed. He needs food and rest. He needs to be ready. He needs to be alive. You can't train a corpse, Viola. He eats, he sleeps, he trains again in the morning. That's the schedule. Viola and Euphemia locked eyes. It was like watching a sword fight conducted entirely through meaningful stares. Viola broke first. Fine, morning, dawn, and I want him running before we start wand work. Stamina first. Harry dragged himself up, healed the split lip with a charm Marge fed him, gentler and faster than a pisky, drawing on the body's own healing rather than forcing it, and went to the kitchen. The pantry was empty, obviously, but a quick apparition to the village at the bottom of the hill, a mixed muggle magical settlement called Cum Derwin, and a trip to the local shop solved that. He cooked for himself, badly, but Euphemia guided him through the basics, and the result was edible if not elegant. He ate at the kitchen table as the sun set over the Welsh hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. The house settled around him, creaking gently, alive with old magic that pulsed in time with the ring on his finger. We need to talk about Dumbledore, Harry said. The spirits gathered. Not all of them, a dozen or so, the key voices, manifesting around the kitchen in chairs and against walls and, in Marge's case, hovering near the ceiling like a translucent cloud. Doria took the lead. She stood at the head of the table, old habit Harry suspected, from a lifetime of running family meetings, and laid out the situation with the precision of a general briefing officer's. Dumbledore will not accept losing control of you. He has invested 16 years in shaping you into the weapon he needs, a brave, loyal, self-sacrificing boy who will walk to his death when the time comes, because he believes it's the right thing to do. She held up a hand when Harry started to speak. I'm not speculating. The soul fragment in your scar, Dumbledore knows it's there. The only method he knows to destroy it requires destroying the vessel, your death. He told me about the prophecy, Harry said slowly. After the ministry, he was devastated, he was crying. I don't doubt his emotions are genuine, Doria said. That's what makes him dangerous. He truly believes he's doing what's necessary. He truly grieves the cost. But he has decided, in his wisdom, that your life is an acceptable price for Voldemort's defeat, and he has structured every aspect of your upbringing to ensure you'll agree with him when the moment comes. The kitchen was very quiet. The Dursleys, Harry said, keeping me there, keeping me ignorant of my inheritance, making sure I was neglected enough to be grateful for any kindness. The information control, Catherine added. The Philosopher's Stone in your first year, a test of your courage and willingness to sacrifice. The Chamber of Secrets, no adult intervened until after you'd faced the basilisk alone. The tournament, entered against your will, but Dumbledore didn't pull you out when he could have. Sirius, Harry said, and his voice went flat and hard. He kept Sirius locked in Grimmauld Place, kept me from him. And when Sirius died, it served the narrative, Doria finished quietly. The boy with nothing left to lose. The weapon without attachments. Harry's hands were fists on the table. The ring pulsed hot. Ireland spoke from the end of the table, her ancient voice cutting through the tension. We do not need to decide what to do about Dumbledore tonight. He is a problem, but he is not the enemy. Voldemort is the enemy. Dumbledore is a failed ally, someone who chose strategy over love and has lost the right to make choices for you. The question is how to handle him without making him an adversary, because despite everything, his knowledge and resources are still valuable. You want me to play nice, Harry said, an edge in his voice. I want you to play smart. There's a difference. Ireland looked around the table. Dumbledore has information about the Horcruxes, possibly more than anyone living. We need that information, but we will get it on our terms, not his. And when we have what we need, he will learn, as gently or as harshly as he requires, that Harry Potter is no longer his to command. Doria nodded slowly. Agreed, but we also need to prepare for the possibility that he tries to reassert control. Magical means, compulsions, loyalty charms, I don't put it past him. He wouldn't, Harry said, and then stopped. Because 3 weeks ago he would have said Dumbledore wouldn't intercept his mail, wouldn't suppress his inheritance, wouldn't keep him in an abusive home deliberately. The ground of his certainties had shifted. I'll check you, Marge said through Ireland's translation. Tonight. A full scan for any magical influence on your mind or body that shouldn't be there. If there are compulsions, I will find them and I will remove them. Do it, Harry said. They spent the rest of the evening on strategy. Doria laid out the political landscape, the Wizengamot factions, the Ministry's current state under Scrimgeour, who had replaced Fudge after the Ministry finally admitted Voldemort was back, the Death Eater infiltration of various institutions. Catherine provided historical context. Ireland contributed knowledge of old alliances and magical pacts that might still be leverageable. And Euphemia, quietly, steadily, kept the conversation grounded in the human element, reminding them all that Harry was 16, that he needed friends and allies his own age, that strategy without love was just another form of manipulation. You are not Dumbledore, she told him firmly. You will not become Dumbledore. You will gather power and knowledge because you must, but you will not sacrifice people on the altar of the greater good. That is the Potter way. We protect. We do not sacrifice. Harry nodded. That felt right. That felt like the core of something he'd always believed but never had the words for. Marge did her scan that night after Harry had settled into the master bedroom, his grandparents' room, which felt strange and right at the same time. Her translucent hands moved over him, her ancient eyes focused with laser intensity, and Harry lay still and let her work. She found 3 things. The first was the soul fragment which she'd already identified. She murmured to it, soothing, keeping it dormant while she worked on the rest. The second was a tracking charm woven into Harry's magical signature. Old, deeply embedded, refreshed annually. It didn't just track his location, it monitored his magical output, flagging any significant changes. Marge removed it like pulling a thorn, delicate and precise. Harry felt something release in his chest that he'd never known was constricted. How long has that been there? He asked. Since you were an infant, Marge said through Ireland. Dumbledore's work, elegant, but not invisible to those who know where to look. The third was subtler and worse. Not a compulsion, not exactly. More of an nation. A faint, persistent magical nudge that predisposed Harry toward trusting authority figures, specifically older male authority figures. It wasn't mind control. It wasn't even a charm in the traditional sense. It was a modification to his emotional landscape, the kind of thing that was almost impossible to detect because it felt natural. "He made me trust him," Harry said, and his voice was very quiet and very dangerous. "He made you inclined to trust," Ironclaw said carefully. "Your actual trust was earned through your experiences, but the inclination was enhanced, nudged, like a plant trained to grow toward a particular window. Marge removed it." Harry felt the difference immediately, not a loss of trust in Dumbledore but a clarity about why he trusted. The impulse to defer, to assume Dumbledore knew best, to forgive without question, that smoothed out into something more balanced. He could still trust. He could still forgive. But the thumb on the scale was gone. Harry lay in the dark afterward, staring at the ceiling of his grandparents' bedroom, and felt something settle in him. Not anger. He'd been angry all summer, and anger was exhausting. Something colder and more useful. Resolve. He was done being shaped, done being aimed, done being the weapon in someone else's war. He was Harry Potter, Lord Potter Peverell, heir to 1,000 years of magic and the collective wisdom of every woman who'd ever loved his blood. And he was going to win this war on his own terms, in his own way, and anyone who tried to stop him, Dark Lord or Puppet Master or Ministry Bureaucrat, was going to learn what happened when you backed a Potter into a corner. "Sleep," Euphemia murmured. "You've done enough for today. Tomorrow we build." Harry slept. No nightmares, no visions. Just deep, dreamless dark and the warmth of the ring on his finger, and the knowledge that he was not alone. Not anymore. He woke at dawn to Viola's voice bellowing, "Run!" in his mind, and he ran out the kitchen door, through the orchard, across the fields, 2 miles out and 2 miles back, while the sun climbed over the Welsh mountains and the morning mist burned off the valleys. He came back gasping and alive and starving, and Euphemia had somehow directed the kitchen to produce breakfast, the house's magic responding to her intent even though she couldn't physically cook. And he ate until he couldn't eat anymore, and then he went to the training room and Viola broke him down and built him back up for 4 more hours. This time she taught him to fight. Not duel, fight. The difference, she explained, was simple. Dueling had rules, fighting didn't. In a duel you stand facing your opponent and take turns casting. In a fight you use everything: the terrain, your body, your enemy's assumptions. If you can end a fight by dropping a ceiling on someone instead of casting a spell, you drop the ceiling. If you can win by apparating behind them instead of outdrawing them, you apparate. Honor is for tournaments. Survival is for war. She taught him combination casting, stringing spells together in rapid chains so fast that an opponent couldn't process the first before the second hit. She taught him environmental magic, using transfiguration offensively, turning the ground to mud, the air to smoke, conjuring obstacles and projectiles and distractions. She taught him to cast on the move, maintaining accuracy while running, jumping, rolling. And she taught him the old spells. Spells Hogwarts didn't teach. Spells that predated the modern standardized curriculum, that came from an era when magic was wilder and less refined and infinitely more dangerous. A cutting curse that followed its target. A shield that didn't just block but reflected, sending attacks back amplified. A binding spell that used the target's own magic against them, growing stronger the more they resisted. Harry absorbed it like a sponge. The ring's magic fed him, not just power but capacity, as if the spirit's presence had expanded his magical core the way exercise expanded muscle. Spells that should have taken weeks to learn clicked into place in hours. Techniques that should have been beyond a 6th year came naturally, as if his blood remembered them even though his mind was learning them for the first time. By the end of the 3rd day at the Manor, Harry could hold his own against Viola for 20 minutes before she overwhelmed him. By the end of the 1st week, he could last 40 minutes. Viola stopped looking satisfied and started looking impressed, which she expressed by making the sessions harder. The other spirits contributed in their own domains. Catherine spent evenings teaching him wardcraft, not just theory now but practice, laying wards around the manor that strengthened and layered the existing ones. Under her guidance, Harry rebuilt the property's defenses from the ground up, creating an interlocking web of protections that would have made the ministry's best ward-breakers weep. Doria drilled him in politics, law, and social maneuvering. The Wisengamot, the ministry, the pure-blood families and their alliances and vendettas, she mapped it all out for him, making him memorize names and relationships and pressure points. "You're going to walk into a world that runs on power and connections," she told him. "You have the power. I'm giving you the connections." Marge worked on the soul fragment every night. Slowly, carefully, she was unwinding it from Harry's magic, loosening the tendrils that had burrowed deep into his core over 15 years of cohabitation. It was delicate work, and she couldn't rush it without risking damage, but each night Harry felt a little lighter, a little clearer, a little more himself. Magic that had been suppressed by the fragment's parasitic presence began to surface, accidental bursts of power that were stronger than anything he'd experienced before, controlled only by the mental discipline Doria was teaching him. Iolanthe served as the overall guide and historian. She knew things about magic that no living person did, not because she was more powerful than Dumbledore or Voldemort, but because she had lived in an era when magical knowledge was shared differently, passed through oral tradition and blood memory rather than standardized textbooks. She told Harry about the Deathly Hallows, the true history, not the fairy tale. The three brothers were real. Their magic was real. But the Hallows were not gifts from death. They were creations of exceptional magical talent. Antioch's wand was crafted from elder wood bonded with a Thestral tail hair, a combination that creates a wand of extraordinary power but also extraordinary instability. It's powerful, but it attracts conflict. Every wielder is eventually challenged and defeated. That's not a curse. It's a design flaw. Cadmus's stone was an attempt to pierce the veil between life and death. He partially succeeded. The stone can pull echoes of the dead into the living world, but they're not truly present. They're reflections, painful and incomplete. My ring works on a different principle entirely, love as the bridge, not force. And Ignatus's cloak, your cloak, is the only hallow that works as intended, because Ignatus was the only brother who understood that magic should serve people, not the other way around. The cloak doesn't just hide you, it separates you from death's awareness entirely. While you wear it, death cannot find you. Is that literal? Harry asked. More literal than you might think. There have been potters who wore the cloak on their deathbed and lingered for days beyond when they should have passed. The cloak doesn't make you immortal, nothing does, but it can buy time. Harry thought about that. He thought about the Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand out there somewhere, the Resurrection Stone lost with the Gaunts, and his own cloak currently folded in his trunk. 3 objects of immense power, and he was connected to all of them by blood. If someone gathered all 3, he said slowly, the legend says they'd be the master of death. Iolanthe shook her head. The legend is garbled. The Hallows weren't meant to be united. They were made by 3 different brothers with 3 different philosophies. Uniting them wouldn't make you master of anything, but she hesitated. The ring changes the equation. My ring, not Cadmus's stone. With the cloak, which hides from death, and the ring, which calls love through death, there may be a resonance I hadn't considered. A bridge and a shield working in concert. Meaning? I don't know, but it's worth thinking about. Harry added it to the growing list of things worth thinking about, which was getting longer by the day. The letter from Dumbledore arrived on the 4th day. Hedwig brought it, looking ruffled and irritated. She'd clearly been held up somewhere before being allowed to deliver. The letter was long, written in Dumbledore's elegant, looping hand, and Harry read it in the kitchen while Doria looked over his shoulder. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, warm, concerned, grandfatherly. Dumbledore expressed worry about Harry's safety outside of Privet Drive. He acknowledged that Harry had learned about his inheritance and said he understood that Harry might feel upset about the administrative arrangements that had been made on his behalf. He assured Harry that everything had been done with his best interests at heart. He invited Harry to come to Hogwarts early or to Grimmauld Place where he could be properly protected. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He assumed that Harry would come when called. Notice what he doesn't say, Doria murmured. He doesn't address the redirect specifically. He doesn't acknowledge wrongdoing. He frames it as an administrative matter, as if intercepting a child's inheritance is paperwork, and he's trying to get you back under a roof he controls. Harry wrote his reply on the back of Dumbledore's own letter, which he knew the old man would find either amusing or insulting. Professor, I am safe, well protected, and exactly where I should be, in my own home. I will see you at Hogwarts on September 1st. HJP short, final, no negotiation. Hedwig carried it away with what Harry chose to interpret as an approving hoot. The days blurred into a rhythm: train, study, eat, learn, sleep. The spirits rotated their attention, ensuring Harry was never working on just one thing: combat and physical fitness in the mornings with Viola, theory and academics in the afternoons with Catherine and Iolanthe, politics and mental arts in the evenings with Doria, healing and soul work at night with Marged. It was intensive, exhausting, and exhilarating. By the end of July, his birthday, which Euphemia insisted on celebrating despite Harry's protests that he'd never had a proper birthday party, "That's exactly why we're having one," she said with a warmth that brooked no argument. Harry was a different person. Not just stronger or more knowledgeable, though he was both. He moved differently. He stood differently. The hunched, wary posture of a boy raised in a cupboard had been replaced by the balanced, aware readiness of someone who knew exactly what his body could do. His magic had deepened and broadened as the soul fragment suppression weakened under Marge's work. Spells he'd struggled with at Hogwarts came effortlessly now. Spells that weren't taught at Hogwarts: combat magic, ancient wards, blood-based protections, environmental manipulation, were becoming second nature. And the ring sang with power now, harmonizing with his magic, amplifying and focusing it. When Harry cast, the spirit's collective knowledge informed his technique, not controlling him, not casting for him, but present, like having a dozen expert coaches whispering suggestions at the speed of thought. On August 1st, Dumbledore came. Harry was in the training room, running combat drills against conjured opponents, a technique Viola had developed that used shaped magic to create hostile constructs that fought back with limited intelligence. He was moving through 3 of them when the Manor's wards chimed. Not an alarm, a notification. Someone was at the gate. Someone powerful. Harry dismissed the constructs with a wave and reached out through the wards the way Catherine had taught him. The wards showed him the visitor, an old man with a long white beard and half-moon spectacles, standing at the wrought iron gate with his wand hand conspicuously empty, his expression unreadable. "He's testing the wards," Catherine said, "probing them. He's surprised. He didn't expect defenses this sophisticated." "Let him in," Harry asked. "Your choice," Doria said, "but if you do, he comes to you, not the other way around. He waits in the room you choose. He stands until you tell him to sit. These are your wards, your home, your ground. Make him feel it." Harry opened the gate remotely, a flex of will through the ward matrix, and walked to the front room. He stood by the fireplace, leaned one shoulder against the mantel in a pose that was deliberately casual, and waited. He didn't check a mirror. He didn't straighten his clothes. He didn't fidget. The front door opened and Albus Dumbledore walked into Potter Manor. He looked old. That was Harry's first thought. The man who had loomed so large in his life, omniscient, omnipresent, the most powerful wizard in the world, looked old and tired and worried. His blue eyes swept the room, taking in the restored furnishings, the gleaming floors, the wards thrumming in the walls, and Harry could tell the exact moment he noticed, the ring on Harry's finger. Dumbledore's eyes fixed on the ring, and something shifted in his expression. Not recognition exactly, he didn't know this ring. But he knew Peverell work when he felt it, and the magic radiating from the dark band was unmistakable. "Harry," he said, and his voice was warm and careful and completely controlled. "Professor, welcome to my home. Please sit down." Dumbledore sat. In the armchair Harry indicated, not the one he would have chosen. A small thing, but Harry saw him register it. "You've been busy," Dumbledore said, looking around. "This house hasn't been occupied in 40 years. Since my grandparents died, since you moved my parents to Godric's Hollow instead of letting them stay here, behind wards that would have warned them of any approach." Harry kept his voice conversational. But I'm sure you had good reasons for that. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. "Harry," Dumbledore said again, and the warmth was gone now, replaced by something more real, the voice of a man who was calculating very quickly. "I understand that you've learned things that are upsetting. The decisions I made regarding your guardianship and your inheritance were made without my knowledge or consent, in violation of my family's wishes, for purposes you haven't explained. You intercepted my Gringotts correspondence for 5 years. You suppressed information about my inheritance. You placed a tracking charm on me that monitored my magical development." Harry held up a hand before Dumbledore could respond. "I'm not interested in justifications right now. I didn't let you in to argue." "Then why did you let me in?" "Because despite everything, you know things I need to know, about Voldemort, about the Horcruxes." The word landed like a stone in still water. Dumbledore's expression didn't change. The man's control was extraordinary, but Harry saw his fingers tighten on the armrest. "What do you know about Horcruxes?" Dumbledore asked quietly. "Enough to know that's what the diary was. Enough to suspect there are more. And enough to know," Harry paused, choosing his words with the care Doria had taught him, "that the situation is more complicated than a simple dark wizard with a fear of death." Dumbledore studied him. Those blue eyes, which Harry had once found twinkling and kind, were piercing now, searching, evaluating. Harry felt the faintest brush of legitimacy against his outer thoughts, and let it find exactly what Doria had prepared. A surface layer of calm determination, reasonable concerns, and absolutely nothing about the ring's true nature or the spirits. "You've learned occlumency," Dumbledore said, and he couldn't quite keep the surprise out of his voice. "I've learned a lot of things this summer, Professor." Another long pause. Dumbledore leaned back in his chair, and some of the calculation left his face, replaced by something that might have been genuine respect, or might have been a better hidden calculation. "I have made mistakes, Harry. I won't insult you by denying it. The decisions I made were, I believe they were necessary. I still believe some of them were. But I am beginning to see that the boy I was trying to protect has become a young man who no longer needs or wants my protection." "I want your alliance," Harry said. "Not your protection. There's a difference." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. "Alliance? Between equals. I know I'm 16. I know you have a century of experience I don't. But I have resources and knowledge of my own, and I'm not going to pretend I don't just to make you comfortable. So here's what I'm proposing. You share what you know about the Horcruxes, all of it, not the curated version, and I share what I learn as I learn it. We work together. But you don't make decisions for me, you don't keep secrets from me, and you don't treat me like a chess piece. If you can do that, we can win this war. If you can't," Harry shrugged, "I'll win it anyway. It'll just take longer." The room was very quiet. Dumbledore looked at Harry, really looked. In that way he had that seemed to see through surfaces to something underneath, and what he found there made him go very still. "You've changed," he said softly. "I grew up. You should have let me do it sooner." Dumbledore closed his eyes. When he opened them, Harry saw, for just a moment, the real man behind the masks. Tired, sad, genuinely remorseful, but also stubborn, convinced of his own rightness even as the evidence crumbled. "The Horcruxes," Dumbledore said. "I believe there are 6, not counting Voldemort himself. The diary which you destroyed. A ring, the Gaunt family ring, which I believe contained the Resurrection Stone. I found it this summer. It was cursed." He held up his right hand, and Harry saw what he hadn't noticed before. The hand was blackened, dead-looking, the skin shriveled and dark from the fingertips to the wrist. Harry stared. The spirits were silent in his mind, but he could feel their attention sharpening like blades. "The curse is contained but not cured," Dumbledore said calmly. "I have perhaps a year." The room tilted slightly. Harry gripped the mantle. "A year? Give or take. Severus has slowed its progress, but the curse is persistent." Dumbledore smiled faintly. "Another mistake, I'm afraid. I was eager, and the ring's magic was more dangerous than I anticipated." "The Resurrection Stone," Iolanthe whispered in Harry's mind. "He found Cadmus's stone, set in a ring, the Gaunt ring, and it was a Horcrux. Voldemort turned Cadmus Peverell's creation into a vessel for a fragment of his soul, the desecration." "What happened to the stone?" Harry asked. "The Resurrection Stone inside the ring," Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "You know about the Hallows." "I know about a lot of things, Professor. The stone." "Destroyed, the Horcrux was destroyed and the stone with it. I had hoped—" Dumbledore stopped. His expression was unguarded for just a moment, and Harry saw something raw underneath, longing, grief, the face of a man who had wanted to speak to the dead and had that hope literally blow up in his hand. "I'm sorry," Harry said, and meant it. Whatever Dumbledore had done, whatever manipulation and control and misguided chess mastering, the man was dying, and he'd lost the thing he wanted most in the same moment. "The other Horcruxes," Harry said, gently steering back. "You said 6. "The diary is gone. The ring is gone. What are the others?" Dumbledore collected himself and began to talk. Really talk, not the careful, curated revelations he'd doled out before, but a full accounting. Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, something of Ravenclaw's, probably the lost diadem, Nagini the snake, and he paused, and Harry prompted. "And I believe there is a 7th, an unintentional one, created the night Voldemort attacked you as a baby." The spirits held their collective breath. "You mean me," Harry said flatly, "the soul fragment in my scar." Dumbledore stared at him. The color drained from his face in a way that had nothing to do with his cursed hand. "You know." "I know. And I know you've known for years, and I know your plan for dealing with it." Harry's voice was even, controlled, though inside something was burning. "I die. That's your end game. I walk up to Voldemort and let him kill me, and the fragment dies with me, and then, what? You hope that's enough, that someone else finishes him off." "Harry, is that or is that not your plan?" The longest silence yet. Dumbledore's hands were trembling, his cursed hand and his healthy one both shaking. "It was," he whispered. "It was the only way I could see. The fragment is bound to your life force. If you die, it dies. And the sacrifice, Lily's love, passed through you, would protect everyone you died for. It would work. The magic is sound." "The magic is sound," Harry repeated, and his voice was ice. "The magic of killing a 16-year-old boy is sound. I have spent 16 years trying to find another way, and you didn't because you were looking in the wrong places." Harry touched the ring on his finger. "The soul fragment is being removed, right now, as we speak. The old magic older than Hogwarts, older than the Hallows, knows how to deal with soul parasites. In a few more weeks it'll be gone and I'll still be alive." Dumbledore stared at the ring. His blue eyes were wide, almost wild, and Harry could see the man's formidable mind racing, trying to understand, trying to categorize. "What is that ring, Harry?" "Family magic," Harry said. "The one thing you couldn't suppress because you didn't know it existed. The one thing you couldn't control because it was never yours to control." He straightened up from the mantel. "I told you I have resources. I meant it. You don't need to carry this alone anymore, Professor. And you don't need to sacrifice me. But you do need to trust me the way I've been trusting you for 5 years, blindly, on faith, because the alternative is worse." Dumbledore sat in the armchair in Harry's family home, and for perhaps the first time in decades, looked like a man who had been offered something he desperately wanted but couldn't quite believe was real. "You can truly remove the Horcrux?" he asked, and his voice cracked on the last word. "It's already half done." Old man's eyes closed. A single tear tracked down his lined face into his beard. "Then I have been wrong," he said, "about so many things, and I have been cruel in ways I told myself were kind." "Yes," Harry said, "you have, and we don't have time for you to wallow in it because you've got a year to live and there are Horcruxes to find and a war to win. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything, no more secrets, and I'm going to handle it, not as your weapon, as your ally. And when this is over, if we're both still alive, we're going to have a very long conversation about what you did to me. But that's for after. Right now we work." Dumbledore opened his eyes, looked at Harry, and slowly, with the gravity of a man setting down a weight he'd carried for longer than Harry had been alive, he nodded. "Alliance," he said. "Alliance." They talked for 3 more hours. Dumbledore laid out everything, his memories of Tom Riddle, his theories about the Horcrux locations, his network of spies and contacts, the state of the Order. Harry listened, asked sharp questions, and filed it all away. He didn't reveal the spirits. He didn't explain the ring beyond family magic. But he gave Dumbledore enough to understand that the game had changed, that Harry was not the frightened boy he'd been grooming, but something new, something unpredictable, something that might actually win. When Dumbledore left, walking down the drive in the fading afternoon light, looking somehow both smaller and lighter than when he'd arrived, Harry stood at the window and watched him go. "That was well done," Doria said. "Better than I expected," Viola admitted. "He's still dangerous," Catherine cautioned. "A man who planned your death for 16 years doesn't change his nature in one conversation." "No," Harry agreed silently, "but he's useful, and he's dying, and despite everything he does care. In his broken, terrible way he cares. So did Cadmus," Iolanthe said softly. "Care without wisdom is a blade without a handle. It cuts the wielder as surely as the enemy." Harry touched the ring. September was coming. Hogwarts was coming. And with it, the wizarding world was going to learn that the boy who lived had become something they had no category for. He turned from the window and went back to training. There was so much to do. Chapter 3. The return of House Potter Platform 9 3/4 was chaos, same as every September 1st. Parents fussing over trunks, owls screeching, first-years looking terrified, seventh-years looking bored. The Hogwarts Express sat gleaming and scarlet against the gray London morning, steam curling from its chimney like the world's most nostalgic dragon. Harry stepped through the barrier and didn't pause. He looked different, and he knew it, and he didn't care who noticed. 2 months of Viola's training and Euphemia's insistence on proper meals had filled out his frame, not bulky, but solid. The kind of lean muscle that came from running hills and combat drills and casting until your arms shook. His clothes were new, not Dudley's cast-offs, not even standard Hogwarts robes, but tailored wizarding attire in dark charcoal with the Potter Peverell crest subtle but visible at the collar. A silver stag for Potter, a triangle bisected by a line for Peverell. Doria had insisted on the crest. "Symbols matter," she'd said, "especially to people who think in symbols." His hair was still a mess. Some things were genetic destiny. The ring sat on his right hand, warm and present. The spirits were with him, all of them, withdrawn into the ring's ambient field, conserving his magic for the day ahead. Doria and Viola were closest to the surface, ready to manifest at a moment's notice. Euphemia was a warm pressure at the back of his mind, steady as a heartbeat. Harry moved through the platform crowd and people noticed. Heads turned. Whispers started. The boy who lived always drew attention, but this was different. This wasn't the usual gawking at his scar. People were looking at how he moved, how he carried himself, the unfamiliar confidence in his step. A few of the older pureblood families, the ones who understood what a family crest on a collar meant, went very still as he passed. He spotted the Weasleys first. Hard to miss them. A cluster of red hair near the middle of the platform, Molly's voice carrying over the din as she marshaled her children toward the train. Ron was slouching beside his trunk, looking bored. Ginny was talking to someone Harry couldn't see. And there, slightly apart from the group, Hermione stood with her arms crossed and a pinched expression that meant she was worried about something and trying to solve it through sheer force of intellect. Harry walked over. "Hey." Ron turned, opened his mouth, and stared. Hermione looked up and her eyes went wide. "Harry," Ron said. "Mate, what did you grow?" "Ate properly for a summer. Amazing what that does." Harry grinned, and it was real, and it felt good to see them. Whatever complications were coming, and Doria had warned him that his oldest friendships would be tested, these were his people. His chosen family. Hermione's eyes had locked onto the crest at his collar. She was already processing, he could tell. Her brain was whirring behind those brown eyes, cross-referencing everything she'd ever read about wizarding heraldry. "Is that a family crest?" she said. "Harry, is that the Peverell symbol?" "Later," he said. "On the train, it's a long story." "But, Hermione, later, please." She pressed her lips together, visibly restraining herself, and nodded. Ron was still staring at Harry like he'd sprouted a second head, but he rallied quickly. Ron had always been better at rolling with surprises than people gave him credit for. "You look like you've been in boot camp, mate," Ron said. "What happened to your summer?" "Got interesting. I'll explain everything, I promise. Let's get on the train." Molly Weasley descended on Harry before he could move, a bone-crushing hug, a rapid-fire assessment of his appearance. "You filled out." "Oh, thank goodness. I was worried sick all summer. You never wrote." And a searching look that was sharper than most people gave her credit for. Molly Weasley raised 7 children and managed the Order of the Phoenix's logistics. She missed nothing. "You look well, Harry dear," she said, and the emphasis on well-carried layers. "Very well." "I am well, Mrs. Weasley. Better than I've been in a long time." She looked at the crest, looked at his face, looked at the ring. And something in her expression shifted. Not suspicion exactly, but the wariness of a mother hen seeing a fox near the coop and not being sure if it was actually a fox or just a very different kind of chicken. "You be careful at school," she said, which was what she always said, and which meant more than it sounded like. Harry found a compartment near the back of the train and claimed it. Ron and Hermione followed. The train pulled out of King's Cross with a lurch, and London's grey sprawl began sliding past the windows. "Right," Hermione said, the moment the compartment door closed. She sat down across from Harry and fixed him with the look she used when she was prepared to wait approximately 4 seconds before demanding answers. "Talk." So Harry talked. Not about everything. He didn't mention the spirits, not yet. That secret was too big and too important to reveal in a train compartment where anyone could be listening. But he told them about the Gringotts letter, the vaults, Dumbledore's intercepts, his inheritance. He told them about Potter Manor, about training over the summer, about claiming his Wisengamot seats. He told them about the Horcruxes, as much as Dumbledore had shared, which was enough to make both their faces go pale. 6 Horcruxes, Hermione whispered. He split his soul 6 times. 7 pieces total, including the one still in him. The diary's gone, the ring's gone. 4 left to find, plus Voldemort himself. Ron had gone from confused to shocked to deadly serious over the course of the explanation. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, Ravenclaw's diadem, and the snake. That's what Dumbledore thinks. And you the scar being handled," Harry said firmly. "It's complicated and I can't explain it yet, but the fragment in my scar is being removed, safely, without me dying." The last 3 words hung in the air. Hermione's hand went to her mouth. Ron's jaw tightened. "That was the plan," Ron said quietly. "Dumbledore's plan. You were supposed to just die. Yes, he didn't see another way." "That bastard," Ron said, with a cold fury Harry had never heard from him before. Ronald Weasley had many faults, but his loyalty, once given, was absolute. "That manipulative old bastard." "Ron." "No, Harry, you don't get to defend him on this one. He was going to let you die. He planned it. All those years of the Dursleys and the danger and the bloody tournament, he was fattening you up for slaughter." Hermione was crying silently. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and took a shaky breath. "How long have you known?" "Since this summer. And I've had time to be angry about it, so I'm past the anger now. I'm in the fixing it stage." Harry looked at them both. "I need you, both of you. But I need you to understand that things have changed. I'm not the same person who left Hogwarts in June. I've learned things, found things, and I have resources I didn't have before. Some of it I can't explain yet, but I need you to trust me." Ron looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once sharp. "Always, mate." Hermione was slower. She was thinking, he could see it, the questions stacking up behind her eyes, the need to understand and categorize warring with the need to trust her friend. Finally she nodded too, but she held up a finger. "I trust you. But if you've learned things that could help us, help all of us, I expect you to share them when you can. I won't be kept in the dark the way Dumbledore kept you. Fair, and I will. Just give me a little time to figure out what's safe to share and what isn't." She accepted that, barely. The train rolled on through the English countryside. Ron went to find the trolley witch and came back with an absurd amount of food which Harry ate without restraint. The conversation shifted to lighter things. Ron's summer, Hermione's reading, Fred and George's joke shop doing absurd business in Diagon Alley. Normal things. Friend things. Harry let himself enjoy it because Euphemia was right. Strategy without love was just another word for manipulation, and these 2 people were worth protecting. Neville found them halfway to Scotland. He appeared at the compartment door, taller than Harry remembered, broader across the shoulders, with a new steadiness in his face that hadn't been there before the Department of Mysteries. Getting your nose broken by Death Eaters and keeping fighting had a way of rebuilding a person from the inside out. Harry, Neville looked at him, blinked. You look different. Good different or bad different? Dangerous different, Neville grinned. I like it. Come in, close the door, I need to talk to you. Neville sat, and Harry, after a glance at Ron and Hermione, who nodded, told him about the Horcruxes. Not the scar, not the inheritance, not the full picture. The Horcruxes because Neville had earned it, because Neville was the other boy who could have been chosen, and because Harry needed allies who understood what they were fighting. Neville listened without interrupting. When Harry finished, he was quiet for nearly a minute. My parents, Neville said slowly. The Lestranges tortured them because they thought Mum and Dad knew where Voldemort was, but if he had Horcruxes, the Lestranges might have been protecting one. Bellatrix is fanatical enough. Harry stared at him. That was a leap he hadn't made. That Dumbledore hadn't articulated. The cup of Hufflepuff entrusted to a most loyal servant. Neville, Harry said. That's brilliant. It's obvious, Neville said, but he flushed with pleasure. If you're Voldemort and you need to hide something precious, you give it to the person who'd die before giving it up. That's Bellatrix. The Lestrange vault, Hermione breathed. In Gringotts, it would be in the Lestrange vault. We'll figure that out, Harry said, filing it away, already feeling Doria's approval humming at the edge of his awareness. Neville, I want you with us this year. Really with us. Not just DA meetings, the real fight. Are you in? Neville met his eyes without flinching. I've been in since the Department of Mysteries, Harry. You just hadn't asked yet. The Hogwarts Express pulled into Hogsmeade Station as the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Students poured off the train in a noisy river, heading for the carriages. Harry could see the Thestrals now, skeletal, leathery-winged horses visible only to those who'd witnessed death, and he reached out and stroked the nearest one's neck as he passed. It leaned into his touch, warm despite looking like something dug from a grave. I can see them now too, Neville said quietly beside him. Since the Ministry, Harry nodded. They climbed into a carriage, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville, and rattled up the road toward the castle. Hogwarts appeared around a bend in the road, and Harry felt the familiar punch of it, the towers and turrets and glowing windows, the sheer impossible beauty of a castle made of magic and history and 1,000 years of accumulated wonder. But this time, the feeling was different. He wasn't coming home to the only place he'd ever felt safe. He had a home now, a real one. He was coming to Hogwarts as a student and an ally, not as a refugee. The Great Hall was exactly as he remembered, candles floating overhead, the enchanted ceiling showing a clear night sky thick with stars, the 4 house tables stretching the length of the room. Harry walked in and the hall went slightly quieter, the way it always did when he appeared, and then slightly quieter still as people took in the changes. He sat at the Gryffindor table, Ron on one side, Hermione on the other, Neville across from him. The sorting began, tiny first-years being herded to the stool by a stern-faced McGonagall, and Harry clapped politely for each new Gryffindor while his eyes moved across the hall, cataloging. The Slytherin table. Malfoy was there, sitting with Crabbe and Goyle, but something was off. Malfoy looked terrible, thin, pale, dark circles under his eyes, and a hunted expression that Harry recognized because he'd worn it himself for years. The look of someone carrying a weight too heavy for them. Death Eater mission, Doria murmured in his mind. Dumbledore mentioned it. The boy's been tasked with something by Voldemort, punishment for his father's failures at the Ministry. Harry studied Malfoy and felt something unexpected. Not anger, not rivalry, but a distant pity. Draco Malfoy was a bully and a bigot and had been a consistent thorn in Harry's side for 5 years. But he was also 16, and his father was in Azkaban, and Voldemort had apparently decided to use the son as leverage against the family. Harry knew what it felt like to be used. Don't waste sympathy on a Malfoy, Doria said, but her tone was uncertain. She was a black by birth. The Malfoys were family distantly. I'm not sympathizing, I'm assessing. His eyes moved on. The staff table, Dumbledore in the center, looking composed and grandfatherly, his cursed hand hidden beneath the table. Snape was to his left, greasy and stone-faced as ever, eyes scanning the hall with the perpetual suspicion of a man who trusted no one. McGonagall was finishing the sorting, and in the defense against the dark arts seat was a new face, or rather an old one. Horace Slughorn, round and walrus-mustached, beaming out at the student body with the eager expression of a man who collected talented people, the way other men collected stamps. Dumbledore's recruitment, Doria noted. Slughorn was a Hogwarts professor decades ago. He taught Tom Riddle. Dumbledore wants him back for a reason, and I'd bet my family silver it's because Slughorn has a memory about Horcruxes that Dumbledore needs. Harry filed that away too. The feast began, food appearing on golden plates, and he ate and talked and laughed and was, for an hour, just a student at dinner. But underneath the normalcy, his mind was working, planning, sorting the chess pieces on a board only he could see. After the feast, as students were streaming toward their common rooms, Harry did something unusual. Instead of following the Gryffindor crowd, he turned and walked toward Dumbledore, who was descending from the staff table. "Professor, a word." Dumbledore looked at him, and for just a moment something complicated moved behind those blue eyes. "Of course, Harry, walk with me." They walked through the corridors together, the castle settling into its nighttime rhythms around them. Portraits murmured. Suits of armor clinked. A ghost drifted through a wall, noticed them, and hastily retreated. "Slughorn," Harry said. Dumbledore's eyebrow rose. "What about him?" "He taught Tom Riddle. You brought him back because he knows something about the Horcruxes. Something you need." Harry glanced sideways. "You could just tell me what it is, save us both time." A pause, then a dry chuckle. "You really have changed, Harry. Yes, Slughorn has a memory, a conversation he had with the young Tom Riddle about Horcruxes. The original memory has been tampered with. Slughorn is ashamed of what he told Riddle and has modified his recollection to hide it. I need the real memory." "So you brought him to Hogwarts hoping I'd charm it out of him?" "Because he collects famous students, and I'm the most famous student there is." "That was the general idea, yes." "Then I'll handle it, but I'm going to do it my way, and it might not look like what you expect." Dumbledore studied him, then nodded. "I trust your judgment." "No, you don't," Harry thought, "but you're learning to pretend." They reached the gargoyle that guarded the headmaster's office. Dumbledore paused. "Harry, the ring you're wearing, I've been thinking about it since our conversation at the Manor. The magic I sense from it is extraordinary, old, and it resonates with something I've spent my life studying." His voice was careful, controlled, but Harry could hear the hunger underneath. "Will you tell me what it is?" "Not yet," Harry said. "When I'm ready." The hunger flickered and was controlled. "Very well, good night, Harry." "Good night, Professor." Harry walked back to Gryffindor Tower, gave the fat lady the password, one of the prefects had shouted it as the crowd entered, and stepped into the common room. It was warm and golden and full of chattering students, and it felt smaller than he remembered, the way places from childhood always feel smaller when you come back to them having grown. He went to the dormitory, changed, and sat on his four-poster bed with the curtains open. Ron was already snoring. Dean and Seamus were talking in low voices across the room. Neville was reading something in bed, his lips moving slightly as he concentrated. "Report," Harry thought, and the spirits responded. "Viola, the castle's wards are impressive but aging. Several weaknesses I can identify from here. Whoever is maintaining them hasn't updated the framework in at least a decade. Catherine, there are layers of magic in this building that I've never encountered. The founder's work, extraordinary. I'll need time to study it, but I believe the castle itself has a degree of sentience. Doria, the political landscape in the school mirrors the outside world. The Slytherins are divided between Death Eater sympathizers and those keeping their heads down. Several of the older students are marked or about to be. Malfoy is the most visible, but not the most dangerous. Iolanthe, the magic in the ring is interacting with the castle's magic. I can feel the founder's work resonating with our family magic. The Peverells helped build the first magical protections on this site centuries before the founders arrived. This is interesting. I need to explore it. Marge, the soul fragment is weakening. 3 more weeks of nightly work. Be patient." Harry lay back on his pillow and closed his eyes. 3 more weeks. By the equinox, the Horcrux in his scar would be gone. His magic, already growing, would be fully unshackled. And then the real work began. Classes started the next morning, and Harry went to them because he was still a student, and because maintaining appearances mattered. But Hogwarts academics had become strange for him, not difficult, not boring exactly, but limited in a way he hadn't felt before. He was learning to weave ancient wards from Catherine, to fight like a battle mage from Viola, to manipulate the political landscape from Doria. Sixth-year charms class felt like being taught to crawl when you could already run. He managed it by compartmentalizing. School was school. He attended, participated, did the work. But his real education happened in the margins, early mornings in the room of requirement, which he'd asked for, and which had provided a perfect training space. Late nights studying the Potter library books, and every spare moment consulting with the spirits about strategy, magic, and the Horcrux hunt. In potions, now taught by Slughorn instead of Snape, Harry excelled immediately. Not because of any Half-Blood Prince's textbook, which didn't exist in this timeline's version of events, because Snape's old copy had been removed from the classroom when Snape took over defense. No, Harry excelled because Euphemia had been a master potioneer, and her guidance, whispered corrections, suggested modifications, insights into ingredient interactions that went far beyond the textbook, made him look like a natural prodigy. Slughorn was beside himself. Remarkable, simply remarkable, boy. You've inherited your mother's talent, no, exceeded it. This draft of living death is the finest I've seen from a student in 30 years. Harry accepted the praise with a modest smile and pocketed the Felix Felicis that Slughorn awarded as a prize. He caught Hermione's eye across the classroom and saw something that worried him, a flash of hurt, quickly hidden. Hermione had always been the best at everything academic. Watching Harry suddenly surpass her with no apparent explanation was hitting a nerve she'd never had to deal with before. He'd have to address that, but not now. Now he had a conversation to engineer. "Professor Slughorn," Harry said, lingering after class while the other students filed out. "That was a brilliant lesson. The way you explained the soporiferous bean, squeezing rather than cutting, I'd never have thought of that." Slughorn preened. He was a man built for flattery, designed to absorb compliments the way a sponge absorbs water, and he expanded visibly under Harry's attention. Well, it's just experience, my boy. Decades of experience. I've always said that potions is as much art as science. The textbooks give you the recipe, but the instinct," he tapped the side of his nose, "that comes from here. I'd love to hear more about your teaching days. My grandmother was a potioneer, Euphemia Potter. I've been reading some of her notes." Slughorn's eyes lit up. "Euphemia, of course. One of the finest students I ever taught. Brilliant woman. She could do things with a cauldron that defied conventional theory." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, Harry, several of my published papers were inspired by ideas she shared during office hours. I always credited her, of course." "He absolutely did not credit me," Euphemia said in Harry's mind, with the weary fondness of a woman who had learned to pick her battles. "I'd love to discuss some of her work with you sometime," Harry said. "Perhaps over dinner. I know you used to host gatherings for select students." Slughorn looked like Christmas had come early and brought friends. "The Slug Club. Yes, I was just thinking of reinstating it. My boy, you would be the guest of honor. I'll send out invitations this week." Harry left the dungeon with the first piece of his Slughorn strategy in place. The memory Dumbledore needed would come, not through force or trickery, but through the careful cultivation of a relationship with a man who valued connection above almost everything else. Slughorn responded to charm, to prestige, to feeling important. Harry would give him all three, and when the moment was right, the memory would follow. "Slytherin tactics from a Gryffindor," Doria said approvingly. "Your great-grandmother would be proud." "She is proud," Harry thought back. Defense against the dark arts was Snape's domain now, and here Harry faced a different challenge. Snape hated him. That hadn't changed and probably never would. But Snape was also, unwillingly, on the same side, and Dumbledore's dying deadline meant the dynamics were shifting. The first lesson was nonverbal spells. Snape stalked through the classroom, black robes billowing, and delivered his introductory speech about the importance of casting without speaking, an essential skill for real combat, he said, with a sneer that suggested he didn't believe any of them were capable of real combat. The incantation is a crutch, Snape said, his black eyes sweeping the room. A verbal spell announces your intention. In a duel with a competent opponent, you might as well send them a written invitation to counter you. Nonverbal casting requires mental discipline and focus, qualities I suspect are in short supply in this room. He paired them up for practice. Harry was paired with Ron, who was struggling. Most of the class was struggling. Nonverbal casting was a significant leap in difficulty, and the standard Hogwarts approach, think the incantation while performing the wand movement, was clunky and unreliable. Harry cast his stunning spell non-verbally on the first attempt. The red bolt of light shot from his wand in absolute silence and caught Ron square in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. The room went quiet. Snape turned. "Well, well," he said, and his voice was silk over broken glass. "It appears Mr. Potter has been practicing, or perhaps he's simply been lucky as usual." "Not luck, Professor," Harry said evenly. "Practice. Should I demonstrate again?" The silence in the room thickened. Students were looking between Harry and Snape with the wide-eyed fascination of people watching a car crash in slow motion. Harry and Snape had been at each other's throats for 5 years, and the established pattern was Harry losing his temper and Snape taking points. But Harry's voice was calm, almost pleasant, and the offer was genuine, not a challenge but a simple question. Snape's eyes narrowed. He was recalibrating, Harry could tell. The boy he'd spent 5 years bullying and provoking had changed, and Snape didn't like changes he hadn't anticipated. "By all means," Snape said softly. "Demonstrate." Harry turned and in rapid succession cast 3 nonverbal spells, a stunning spell at a practiced dummy, a shield charm that shimmered silver in the air, and a disarming charm that whipped Snape's own wand out of his hand and into Harry's. The classroom erupted in gasps. Someone dropped a book. Harry held Snape's wand for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to make the point, then tossed it back. Snape caught it reflexively, his face utterly blank, which was the most dangerous expression Severus Snape had. 20 points from Gryffindor, Snape said, for disarming a professor without permission. "Worth it," Harry said and sat down. Beside him, Ron was staring. Across the room, Hermione looked torn between horror and awe. And behind Snape's expressionless mask, Harry could see the man thinking, reassessing, filing away this new data point about what Harry Potter had become. "Subtle," Doria said dryly. "Viola told me to show, not tell." "I told you to show your enemies," Viola corrected. "Snape is complicated. Snape is someone who respects power," Harry thought. "Now he knows I have it. That changes how he deals with me." He was right. Snape didn't bother Harry for the rest of the lesson. And when Harry left the classroom, he caught Snape watching him with an expression that wasn't hatred or contempt, but something more cautious, more wary. Like a man who'd been casually prodding what he thought was a sleeping dog and realized it was actually a wolf. The first real test came 3 days into the term. Harry was crossing the courtyard between classes when Malfoy intercepted him. The blond boy had Crabbe and Goyle flanking him as always, but the usual Malfoy swagger was absent. He looked drawn, desperate, like a cornered animal trying to bluster its way out. "Potter," Malfoy's voice cracked. He overcompensated by raising his chin. "Heard you've been showing off in class. Big man now, are you?" Harry stopped. Looked at Malfoy, really looked, the way Doria had taught him to read people, the desperation behind the sneer, the way his left hand kept twitching toward his right forearm, the weight loss, the sleeplessness, the fear. "Malfoy," Harry said, "walk with me." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat either. It was something Malfoy clearly hadn't expected, because his rehearsed confrontation stuttered to a halt, and he stood blinking for a moment before recovering. "I don't walk with Crabbe, Goyle. Give us a minute." Harry said it with authority, and something in his voice, or something in the magic that resonated faintly around him, the ring's power leaking into the ambient air, made the 2 large boys actually step back. Malfoy looked at them, shocked, and then looked at Harry with an expression that was closer to fear than anything else. Harry started walking. After a moment, Malfoy followed. They walked to an empty stretch of corridor, away from student traffic. Harry leaned against the wall and looked at Malfoy, and Malfoy looked back, and the silence between them was nothing like the charged, angry silences of previous years. "I know about the task," Harry said. Malfoy went white, actually properly white, the blood draining from his face so fast Harry thought he might faint. "I don't know what Voldemort gave you a mission, punishment for your father's failure at the ministry. I don't know what the mission is specifically, but I know it exists and I can see what it's doing to you." Malfoy's mouth opened and closed. His hand went to his forearm, his left forearm, and Harry saw the flinch when his fingers pressed against the skin there. Marked, then. Voldemort had marked a 16-year-old boy. "This isn't a trick," Harry said, "and I'm not going to turn you in. I'm going to say something you won't believe, and then I'm going to leave and you can think about it. Ready?" Malfoy said nothing. His gray eyes were wide and scared. "You don't have to do this. Whatever the mission is, whatever he's holding over you, there are other options. I have resources now. Real resources. Enough to protect you and your mother if that's what it takes. You don't owe me anything, and I don't expect you to trust me. But the offer is real, and it's open, and it doesn't have an expiration date." Harry pushed off the wall and walked away. Behind him, he heard Malfoy say very quietly, "You don't understand. He'll kill her." Harry stopped but didn't turn around. "I understand better than you think, and I'm telling you if you come to me I can help, that's all." He walked on, around the corner out of sight, and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Risky," Doria said. "If he reports that conversation to his Death Eater contacts, then they learn that Harry Potter is confident enough to offer mercy to an enemy. That scares them more than any threat would." A pause. "You might actually have a talent for this." The first week of classes was also when Harry began his quiet revolution in the political sphere. The letter he'd sent to the ministry over the summer had done its work. The Daily Prophet ran a small item about Lord Potter Peverell claiming his hereditary Wisengamot seats, and the Pureblood Grapevine, which moved faster than any newspaper, did the rest. By the time Harry arrived at Hogwarts, every politically aware student in the school knew that the boy who lived was no longer just a celebrity. He was a lord of two ancient and noble houses, with political power that most adult wizards would kill for. This changed things. Specifically, it changed how the neutral families interacted with him. Daphne Gringotts found him in the library on Friday evening. Harry was at a corner table surrounded by books, working through a complicated ward theory problem that Catherine had set him. He'd asked the room of requirement for a training space that morning and spent 2 hours on combat drills with Viola, then showered and come to the library for academic work. The compartmentalization was becoming natural. Warrior in the morning, student in the afternoon, strategist in the evening. He sensed her before he saw her. Not magically, he just caught a flash of movement at the edge of his vision, someone approaching with the careful deliberation of a person who had thought about this conversation before initiating it. He looked up. Daphne Gringotts was not what he expected. He'd seen her in classes for 5 years, of course, a Slytherin in his year, always near the top of the rankings, always quiet, always watching. He'd filed her away as background, one of the many Slytherins he didn't interact with because the house rivalry made casual cross-house contact socially radioactive. She was tall and composed, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a simple clasp, and eyes the color of a winter sea, gray-blue, sharp, assessing. She carried herself with the controlled poise of someone who had been trained from birth to navigate dangerous social waters. "Lord Potter Peverell," she said, and the formality was deliberate, a signal that this was a political conversation, not a casual one. "Miss Gringotts, sit down." She sat. She placed a book on the table between them, a history of the Wisengamot, he noticed, with a bookmark tucked into the section on hereditary seats. "I'll be direct," she said. "My family is neutral. We've been neutral for 3 generations since the Grindelwald War. We don't align with the Dark Lord and we don't align with Dumbledore. We align with our interests. Pragmatic. Realistic. The neutral families, Gringotts, Davis, Zabini, Abbott, a few others, have survived by staying out of conflicts between extremes. But this war is making neutrality increasingly expensive. The Dark Lord pressures us to join. The Ministry pressures us to declare. And now, she looked at him with those sharp winter eyes. Now there's a third option. Me. You. The Potter Peverell seats change the Wisengamot math. With the neutral block's support, you could form a coalition powerful enough to resist both Voldemort's political puppets and Dumbledore's faction. The neutral families have been waiting for someone to rally around who isn't a Dark Lord or a puppet master. Harry leaned back in his chair and studied her. She was 16, same as him, and she was talking about Wisengamot politics with the fluency of someone twice her age. Doria was practically purring in the back of his mind. She's good, Doria said. The Greengrass family has produced strong political minds for centuries, and she's here on her own initiative, which means her father sent her, or she's acting independently, which is even more interesting. What do the neutral families want? Harry asked. Daphne's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, surprise maybe, that he was taking her seriously instead of dismissing her as a Slytherin with an angle. Safety, autonomy, a post-war world that doesn't punish families for refusing to pick a side in someone else's war, and legal protections against the kind of persecution that followed the last war, where anyone with a Slytherin tie was assumed to be a Death Eater. That's reasonable. It is, and it's been ignored by every faction in wizarding politics for decades. Harry thought about it. The spirits were quiet, letting him work through it himself, though he could feel their attention like spotlight beams. I can't make promises about the post-war world, he said. I don't know what it'll look like. But I can promise that any coalition I build will be based on actions, not affiliations. What people do matters more than what house they were sorted into when they were 11. Daphne studied him for a long moment. Then she reached into her book bag and withdrew a sealed letter. From my father, Lord Cyrus Greengrass. It's an invitation to correspond about the neutral block's interests. Non-binding, informal, a conversation. She placed it on the table. No one expects you to commit to anything, but the fact that you're willing to listen is already more than anyone else has offered. Harry took the letter. I'll respond within the week. She stood, gathered her things, and paused. The political mask slipped for just a second, and underneath was a girl his age, sharp and guarded and tired of being afraid. For what it's worth, she said, I've watched you for 5 years. You're the only person in this school who consistently does the right thing even when it costs you. That's not politics, that's character, and it's why my father is willing to have this conversation at all. She turned and walked out of the library, and Harry watched her go with the distinct feeling that the ground under his feet had just shifted in a way he hadn't anticipated. I like her, Euphemia said. Of course you do, Doria replied. She's exactly the kind of witch a Potter would fall for, smart, dangerous, and completely unimpressed by him. I'm not falling for anyone, Harry thought firmly, yet said 6 spirits simultaneously, and he decided to ignore them all. The weekend brought a development Harry hadn't planned for but should have anticipated. The wider school began to react to the new Harry Potter. It started in the Great Hall at Saturday breakfast, when a ministry owl delivered a large, official envelope bearing the Wisengamot seal. Harry opened it at the Gryffindor table, fully aware that half the hall was watching, and read the contents with a neutral expression. The Wisengamot had formally acknowledged his hereditary seats. Lord Harry James Potter Peverell was now a voting member of the body that governed magical Britain. At 16, while still a student, the whispers that had been building all week became a roar. Harry could feel the attention pressing against him from all sides: curiosity, admiration, envy, fear. Some of it was positive, mostly from students who remembered the DA and saw Harry as a leader. Some of it was hostile, from students whose families were aligned with the Death Eaters and who saw a political threat taking shape. And some of it was confused, from people who'd spent 5 years watching the prophet whipsaw between celebrating and condemning Harry Potter and couldn't figure out which version was real. Harry folded the letter, put it in his pocket, and went back to his toast. He caught Dumbledore's eye at the staff table and gave the old man the faintest nod. Dumbledore's expression was unreadable, but Harry thought he detected something like rueful acknowledgement. The weapon had learned to use itself. Across the hall at the Slytherin table, Daphne Greengrass was watching with those Wintersea eyes, and she gave Harry the smallest possible nod before turning back to her own breakfast. And at the far end of the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy was staring at Harry with an expression that wasn't hatred or contempt or sneering superiority. It was the expression of a drowning man who'd been thrown a rope and was trying to decide if it was a rescue line or a noose. "Give him time," Euphemia murmured. Time is the one thing we're short on, Harry thought, but he understood patience now, in a way he hadn't before the ring. The spirits had waited 800 years for a Potter who needed them. Draco Malfoy could have a few weeks to decide his own fate. In the meantime, there was a war to prepare for, a school to navigate, a political coalition to build, and somewhere in this castle, a room of hidden things that might contain a lost diadem worth a piece of Voldemort's soul. Harry finished his breakfast, stood, and walked out of the great hall with his head up and his shoulders back, and the ring warm on his finger. Behind him the whispers followed, and he let them. Let them talk, let them wonder, let them try to figure out what Harry Potter had become. By the time they understood, it would already be too late to stop him. Chapter 4. Blood remembers the equinox came on a Monday. Harry woke at 3 in the morning, pulled from sleep not by nightmare or alarm but by Marge's gentle insistence, a pressure against his consciousness like a hand on his shoulder. He lay still for a moment, listening to the dormitory sounds, Ron snoring, Neville's quiet breathing, the wind against the tower windows, and then slipped out of bed, pulled on his invisibility cloak and padded barefoot through Gryffindor Tower. The castle was different at night. Not just darker or quieter, but different. The magic in the walls shifted when the students slept, settling into older patterns, deeper rhythms. Harry could feel it through the soles of his feet, a pulse like a slow heartbeat. The portraits dozed in their frames. Filch was somewhere on the second floor, his shuffling footsteps and Mrs. Norris's soft padding distant enough to ignore. Peeves was causing trouble in the dungeons. Harry could feel the poltergeist's chaotic energy through the castle's ward matrix, a skill Catherine had been teaching him. He reached the room of requirement and paced 3 times before the hidden door. I need a place where old magic can work, a place between worlds, a place where the veil is thin. The door that appeared was not the usual smooth wood. It was stone, ancient, rough-hewn, carved with spiraling runes that glowed faintly blue. Harry pushed it open and stepped into a chamber that the room had crafted from his need and the castle's deep memory. A circular stone space lit by floating orbs of pale light, the floor bare except for a complex pattern of interlocking circles drawn in what looked like liquid silver. The air smelled of rain on hot stone, of herbs, of something electric and ancient. Marge was waiting. She manifested fully the moment Harry entered, drawing on his magic with a steady, practiced pull. She looked more solid than he'd ever seen her, less translucent, more present, her wild gray hair actually moving in a breeze that existed only for her, her ember-bright eyes burning with focused intensity. She'd been building to this for weeks. Every night careful work, unwinding the soul fragment thread by thread, weakening it, isolating it. Tonight was the extraction. "Sit," she said in her ancient tongue that the ring translated. "In the center. Remove your shirt." Harry sat cross-legged in the center of the silver circles and pulled his shirt over his head. The air was cool against his skin. Goosebumps rose along his arms. The others, Marge said. They came. Not all of them. Manifesting every spirit would drain Harry dry, and tonight his magic needed to be fully available. But the key ones, the anchors of the spirit court, shimmered into visibility around the chamber's edge. Ireland at the north point, ancient and grave. Euphemia at the east, her warm face tight with worry she was trying to hide. Doria at the south, composed and watchful. Viola at the west, standing guard as if daring anything to interrupt. Catherine between them, her theorist's mind already analyzing the magical patterns in the room. Marge knelt before Harry. Her translucent hands hovered over his scar, and he felt the now familiar gentle probing, but deeper this time, more insistent, pushing past the outer layers to the core of the thing that had lived inside him for 15 years. "This will hurt," she said, not apologetically, factually. "The fragment has been part of you since infancy. It has woven itself into your magical channels like roots through soil. Removing it will feel like tearing those roots out. You must not fight me. You must not resist the pain. Let it move through you. I understand. You don't, but you will." She placed her hands on either side of his scar. "Begin." The first 10 minutes were merely uncomfortable, a deep, pulling sensation behind his forehead, like a headache trying to become something worse. Harry breathed through it the way Doria had taught him during occlumency training, keeping his mind open and his body relaxed, letting the pain exist without resisting it. Then Marge reached the deep roots and the world turned white-hot. Harry screamed. He couldn't help it. The pain was beyond anything he'd experienced, beyond Cruciatus, beyond the scar pain of Voldemort's emotions, beyond the basilisk venom that had eaten through his arm in the chamber. This was existential pain, the sensation of something being pulled from the deepest part of him, something that had fused with his identity so completely that removing it felt like removing a vital organ. The silver circles on the floor blazed. The chamber shook. Harry's magic surged wildly, uncontrolled, slamming against the room of requirement's walls with enough force to crack stone. He heard Viola bark a command and felt the spirits throw their collective will into containing the blast, channeling his wild magic into the silver patterns on the floor. Marge didn't stop. Her hands were locked on his head, her ember eyes blazing like twin furnaces, and she was chanting in that ancient tongue, not words of power in the modern sense but something older, something that predated structured spellcraft entirely. It was a healer's working, raw and primal, and it was reaching into Harry's very soul and prying loose the parasite that had lived there since he was 1 year old. Harry felt it, the fragment, felt it clearly for the first time, separate from himself. A cold, sharp alien presence that had been camouflaged by 15 years of integration. It was afraid, it was fighting. It hooked into his magic like barbed wire and pulled, trying to anchor itself, trying to hold on. "No," Harry thought, and his thought was fire. "You don't belong here. You never belonged here. Get out." He pushed. Not with magic, with will. With the bone-deep, bedrock certainty of a boy who had survived a cupboard under the stairs and a killing curse, and 4 encounters with the darkest wizard alive, and who was done hosting a piece of that wizard in his own head. He pushed, and the spirits pushed with him, their combined will channeling through the ring, through the silver circles, through Marge's ancient hands. The fragment screamed, not aloud in Harry's mind. A high, cold, inhuman shriek that was recognizably Voldemort's voice stripped of all pretension and dignity, reduced to its essence. A terrified child who had been afraid of death and had torn his own soul apart to escape it. For one terrible, crystalline moment, Harry felt pity. Then the fragment tore free. Harry pitched forward, catching himself on his hands, gasping. The pain vanished so abruptly it left a ringing silence in its wake. His head felt empty, light, as if he'd been carrying a stone in his skull his entire life and someone had finally lifted it away. Marge held something between her cupped hands. Harry couldn't see it clearly. It was more of a feeling than a sight. A cold, dark pressure between her translucent palms, writhing and twisting like a shadow trying to escape. Her chanting changed, becoming lower, more rhythmic, and the silver patterns on the floor converged on her position, spiraling inward, tightening around the extracted fragment like a net. "The vessel," Iolanthe said, stepping forward. She produced something Harry hadn't seen before, a small stone box covered in runes that pulsed with the same energy as the Peverell ring. "We discussed this. The fragment cannot be destroyed by conventional means, not here, not without fiendfire or basilisk venom, but it can be contained, permanently sealed, rendered inert." Marge lowered the fragment into the box. The moment the dark presence touched the runed stone, it convulsed, shrank, and went still. Iolanthe closed the lid, and Harry felt a sealing charm of such depth and power that it made Hogwarts wards feel like tissue paper. The box went cold and silent and dead. "Done," Marge said, and sat down heavily, or as heavily as a spirit could sit. She looked exhausted, which Harry hadn't known spirits could be. "It is done. You are clean." Harry sat on the stone floor and breathed. In and out. In and out. Each breath felt different, clearer, deeper, as if he'd been breathing through a cloth for 15 years and it had finally been removed. His magic was God, his magic was enormous. He could feel it now, truly feel it without the fragment's parasitic suppression. It surged through his channels like a river unblocked, vast and powerful and entirely his own. He raised his hand and light gathered in his palm without thought, without effort, without a wand. Pure white light, warm and bright, filling the chamber. He closed his fist and the light compressed into a sphere the size of a marble, dense with power. He opened his hand and it drifted upward, joining the floating orbs near the ceiling. Wandless magic, not a flicker, not a strain, easy as breathing. "How much was the fragment suppressing?" Harry asked, his voice rough. "Estimates are imprecise," Catherine said, her theorist's mind already working. "But based on the differential between your magical output before and what I'm sensing now, significant. Conservatively, the fragment was suppressing 40 to 50% of your natural magical capacity." "Half," Viola said, and for the first time the unshakable warrior woman sounded stunned. "Half your magic, and you still fought a Dark Lord 4 times. You still cast a corporeal patroness at 13, with half your power hobbled. What are you going to be with all of it?" Euphemia whispered. Harry stood. His body felt different, not just free of the fragment's presence but physically charged, as if his muscles and bones and blood had been waiting for this moment and were now singing with released potential. He stretched his hands, flexed his fingers, and felt magic respond to every micro-movement like an extension of his body. He looked at the stone box containing the fragment, one Horcrux dealt with. The diary was gone. The ring was gone. That left Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, Ravenclaw's diadem, and Nagini. "And the one in this castle," Iolanthe said softly. Harry looked at her. "You think the diadem is here, in Hogwarts? The castle's magic has been whispering to me since we arrived. There is something wrong in one of the hidden spaces, a corruption, a festering. The room of hidden things, the room of requirement's other face. I believe the diadem is there, hidden among centuries of forgotten objects." Harry's heart kicked. "Tonight." "Not tonight. You've just undergone a major magical working. Your channels need time to settle. Tomorrow, we'll find it tomorrow." Harry nodded. His body was buzzing with released energy, every cell awake and alert, but Iolanthe was right. He could feel the rawness in his magical channels, like muscles that had been pushed to their limit. He needed rest. He pulled his shirt back on, tucked the stone box into his pocket, and wrapped himself in the invisibility cloak. The spirits faded back into the ring's ambient field, their presences settling around him like a warm blanket. He made it back to Gryffindor Tower without encountering anyone, and slipped into bed, just as the first gray light of dawn touched the windows. He lay on his back, feeling the absence where the fragment had been, not an emptiness but a space, clean and open, waiting to be filled with something that was purely his own. "Sleep," Euphemia murmured. "You did so well. Sleep." Harry slept, and for the first time in his life his dreams were entirely his own. He woke 4 hours later to morning light and Ron shaking his shoulder. "Mate, you all right? You slept through breakfast." Harry sat up. The world looked different. Colors were slightly sharper, sounds slightly clearer. He felt, present in a way he hadn't before, as if a veil between himself and reality had been lifted. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." Ron frowned at him. "Your scar looks different." Harry's hand went to his forehead. The scar was still there. He could feel the raised lightning bolt shape under his fingertips, but it felt different, thinner, less angry, as if it were fading. He went to the bathroom mirror and looked. Ron was right. The scar, which had been an angry red-purple for as long as Harry could remember, had faded to a pale silver. Still visible, still distinctive, but no longer the vivid wound it had been. Just a scar. Just a mark. Harry touched it and felt nothing. No pain, no tingle, no whisper of Voldemort's presence at the other end of a parasitic link, just skin. He smiled at his reflection, and the boy in the mirror smiled back. And for the first time, the face looking back at him felt entirely like his own. Classes that day were revelatory. In charms, Flitwick had them practicing advanced summoning charms, calling specific objects from a distance rather than a general accio. Harry cast once, wandlessly and wordlessly out of habit, and every object on every desk in the classroom flew to him simultaneously. 28 textbooks, 30 quills, a dozen ink bottles, Flitwick's own coffee mug, and Neville's toad Trevor all converged on his position in a whirlwind of objects. The classroom descended into chaos. Students ducked. Flitwick squeaked. Harry caught everything in a massive levitation field again, wandlessly, and set it all down gently, including Trevor, who croaked indignantly. "Mr. Potter," Flitwick said, his tiny form quivering with what Harry realized was not anger but excitement. "That was the magical output required to, and non-verbally, good heavens, how did you—" "Sorry, Professor, I'm still calibrating." Flitwick looked at him with enormous eyes. "Calibrating," he repeated faintly. Hermione was staring at Harry from across the room, and her expression had shifted from the hurt competitiveness of the past week to something more complex, awe, concern, and a fierce intellectual curiosity that was burning through every other emotion. After class, she caught up to him in the corridor. "Harry, what happened to you? What do you mean?" "I mean that you just performed a feat of wandless magic that most adult wizards couldn't manage with a wand and their full concentration. I mean that your scar has faded. I mean that the ambient magical field around you has changed. Yes, I can sense that. I've been studying magical theory all summer, and something is fundamentally different about you since last night." Harry looked at her, Hermione Granger, his best friend, the smartest person he'd ever met, and someone who deserved the truth, at least part of it. "Not here," he said. "Tonight. You, me, Ron, and Neville. Room of requirement. I'll explain what I can." She held his eyes for a long moment, searching. Then she nodded. "Tonight." Transfiguration was next, and McGonagall had them working on human-to-animal transformations, one of the most advanced branches of the discipline, normally reserved for Newt level. Harry, drawing on the spirit's accumulated knowledge, performed a partial transformation on the first attempt, his hand shifting into a perfect eagle's talon, feathered and clawed, before he reversed it. McGonagall stared at the talon, then at Harry, then at the talon again. She removed her glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. "Mr. Potter, that is a partial animagus transformation. Is it?" "It is. It takes most adult wizards years to achieve what you've just done casually." She leaned closer, her Scottish brogue thickening the way it did when she was either very angry or very impressed. "Is there something you'd like to tell me? I've been studying hard over the summer, Professor." "Studying," she repeated, in exactly the same tone Flitwick had said, "calibrating." She looked at him for a long, searching moment and then said something he didn't expect. "Your father was an animagus, unregistered. He and his friends achieved the transformation in their 5th year. I discovered this after his death." A pause. "If you're pursuing the same path, I'd prefer you did it properly. My office. Thursdays, 7 o'clock. Harry blinked. Professor McGonagall, strict by-the-book Minerva McGonagall, was offering to personally tutor him in animagus transformation. "Yes, ma'am, thank you." She nodded crisply and moved on to the next student, but Harry caught the ghost of a smile on her stern face. "She knew your father well," Euphemia said softly. "She watched him grow up, watched him die. And now she's watching his son become something extraordinary. Let her help. She's earned it." The evening meeting in the room of requirement was small, private, and would change several things about the coming months. Harry had asked the room for a comfortable, secure space, and it had provided a warmly lit sitting room with deep armchairs, a fire crackling in a hearth, and wards so dense that Catherine had given an approving hum when they walked in. Ron and Hermione arrived together, Neville a minute later, and they settled into chairs with the uncertain energy of people who knew something significant was about to happen. Harry stood by the fire and looked at them, his friends, his people. And behind him, invisible, the spirits waited. "What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room. I need your word." 3 nods, no hesitation. "Over the summer, I claimed my inheritance from Gringotts, the full Potter Peverell inheritance. You know about the vaults and the political stuff, but there was something else, something in the oldest vault." He held up his right hand, showing the ring. "The Peverell ring, Not the resurrection stone, this is something different, something older. Made by Iolanthe Peverell, the woman who married into the Potter family 800 years ago. It carries an enchantment, a covenant. When the last Potter stands alone with no living family left, the ring activates. It summons the spirits of every witch who ever loved a Potter, every wife, mother, lover, protector, across 1,000 years. Silence. 3 faces staring at him. They're here, Harry said. Right now. They've been with me since July. He looked at Iolanthe, who stepped forward and manifested. She appeared gradually, a shimmer in the air that solidified into a tall, dark-haired woman in medieval robes, her gray-green eyes sweeping across the 3 stunned students with ancient, measuring intelligence. I am Iolanthe Peverell, she said, first of the Potter mothers. I'm pleased to meet the friends of my descendant. Ron's mouth was hanging open. Hermione had gone rigid, her eyes enormous. Neville, to Harry's surprise, reacted first. He stood from his chair, his face pale but his jaw set, and gave Iolanthe a formal bow. Lady Peverell, it's an honor. I'm Neville Longbottom. Iolanthe smiled. Longbottom, I know the name. Your family and mine have been allies for 7 centuries. It is good to see that alliance lives. Holy, Ron breathed. Euphemia manifested next, warm and solid and beaming. Then Doria, cool and elegant. Then Viola, scarred and imposing. They filled the room with presences that were undeniably real, undeniably powerful, and undeniably ancient. How is this possible? Hermione whispered. Her hands were gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. The resurrection stone creates echoes, shadows, not this. These are fully realized spiritual manifestations. The magical theory required to is beyond anything in your textbooks, child, Doria said, not unkindly. The Peverell ring predates modern magical theory by centuries. It operates on principles that the wizarding world has forgotten. I haven't been hiding this for fun, Harry said. I needed to keep it secret until I understood it myself and until the most important work was done. He touched his scar. The soul fragment, the piece of Voldemort that was in my scar. Marge, one of the oldest spirits, removed it. Last night, Hermione's hand flew to her mouth. Ron went pale. It's gone, Harry said. Completely gone, I'm free of it. And my magic, he held up his hand and conjured a ball of light, wandless, effortless, letting it float above his palm. My magic is fully my own for the first time. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Ron, with the blunt practicality that made him invaluable in a crisis, said, What's the plan? Harry grinned. Ron Weasley cutting through the wonder to the strategy, exactly what he needed. The plan is Horcruxes. We've dealt with the diary, the ring, and my scar. That leaves 4, Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, Ravenclaw's diadem, and Nagini the snake. He paused. The diadem is in this castle. Iolanthe is sure of it. It's in the room of hidden things, the room of requirement storage form. We're going to find it. When? Neville asked. Tomorrow night. Hermione, who had been visibly processing at lightning speed, suddenly sat up straight. The room of hidden things. That's what, in our 5th year, when the DA was using the room of requirement, sometimes students found random objects in the corridor outside. Books, broken furniture, old artifacts. Things the room was leaking. The room has a hoarder form, Harry confirmed. I saw it once when I was hiding the half-blood, never mind. It's a massive space filled with centuries of hidden objects. If Voldemort hid the diadem at Hogwarts, that's where it would be. And once we find it, Ron asked, we can't just smash it. The ring Dumbledore found nearly killed him. We have the sealed fragment from Harry's scar, Iolanthe said, contained in a runed box of Peverell make. The diadem can be contained the same way, the soul fragment separated from the artifact and sealed. Marge has the skill. The rest of us have the power. What about the other Horcruxes? Hermione asked. The cup and the locket. Harry glanced at Neville. Tell them your theory. Neville straightened in his chair. The cup. If Voldemort entrusted a Horcrux to a loyal follower, the most fanatical one would be Bellatrix Lestrange. She'd die before giving it up. And if she has it, it's in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. Gringotts, Ron said flatly. You want to break into Gringotts. I don't want to break in. I want to walk in through the front door. Harry leaned forward. I'm Lord Potter Peverell. The goblins bowed to me when I left the bank. The Peverell ring carries weight in goblin culture. The old pacts between the Peverell family and the goblin nation predate Gringotts itself. If I explain what's in the Lestrange vault, a piece of a dark wizard's soul, stored without goblin knowledge or permission, the goblins will be furious. Dark artifacts hidden in their bank without their consent is a violation of goblin treaty law. They'll want it out. That's actually clever, Hermione said, blinking. Don't sound so surprised. The locket, Doria said, drawing the conversation forward. Slytherin's locket. Dumbledore has theories about its location. He thinks it was hidden in a cave, a place Voldemort visited as a child. He wants to take me there. Let him, Doria said, but go prepared. Dumbledore is dying. His judgment is compromised by urgency and a desire to make amends. He'll take risks he shouldn't. And Nagini? Ron asked. Nagini stays with Voldemort. She's the last one. We deal with her when we deal with him. The room absorbed this. 4 teenagers and a gallery of spirits planning the systematic destruction of the most dangerous dark wizard in history's anchors to immortality. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt necessary and real and achievable in a way that Dumbledore's lone wolf approach never had. We're with you, Neville said, and Ron and Hermione nodded. The spirits faded back into the ring, and Harry sat with his friends for another hour, talking through details, assigning tasks, building the bones of a plan that would carry them through the year. Hermione would research the Horcrux objects, their histories, their magical properties, anything that might help with extraction or containment. Ron would map out logistics, locations, timing, contingencies, the practical machinery of a campaign. Neville would work the social angle, the DA members who might be brought back into the fold, the allies across houses who could be trusted. And Harry would hunt. The next night, Harry stood before the room of requirement and paced 3 times, thinking, I need the place where everything is hidden. The door that appeared was enormous, twice the height of a normal door, heavy oak banded with iron. Harry pushed it open and stepped into a cathedral of clutter. The room of hidden things was vast. Aisles stretched in every direction, formed by towering stacks of objects piled to the distant ceiling, broken furniture, old textbooks, cauldrons, broomsticks, bottles, bones, busts, clothing, cages, and 1,000 other things that had been hidden, lost, or forgotten over a millennium of Hogwarts history. Dust lay thick over everything. The air smelled of old paper and mouse droppings and the particular musty sweetness of magic gone stale. He wasn't alone. Iolanthe walked beside him in full manifestation, her ancient eyes scanning the aisles with an intensity that bordered on hunger. She could feel the Horcrux. She'd felt it since entering the castle, a corruption in the magical weave, a dark note in an otherwise harmonious chord. This way, she said, turning left down an aisle of stacked chairs. The taint is stronger here. They moved through the labyrinth of lost things, Iolanthe leading, Harry following with his wand drawn and his senses extended. Catherine had taught him to feel magic like a texture, smooth for benign enchantments, rough for curses, oily for dark magic. He was pushing that sense outward, scanning the piles of objects for the distinctive feel of a soul fragment. He found it by walking past a teetering stack of old furniture and feeling his skin crawl. It was sitting on top of a dusty cabinet, half hidden beneath a moth-eaten wig and a tarnished tiara that had been someone's idea of fashion several centuries ago. But the tiara beneath the wig wasn't costume jewelry. It was delicate silver, set with a sapphire, and inscribed along the band were the words, "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem, and it radiated wrongness like a wound radiates heat. Harry reached for it and Iolanthe caught his wrist. Don't touch it with bare skin. The Horcrux defenses will activate. He conjured a cloth, silk, because Catherine had explained that silk disrupted most curse contact effects, and wrapped it around his hand before picking up the diadem. Even through the silk, he could feel the soul fragment inside, twisting and writhing, aware of him, recoiling from the Peverell ring's presence. It knows, Harry murmured. They always know, Iolanthe said. The fragments are not truly sentient, but they have a kind of awareness, a survival instinct. This one can feel the ring's magic, and it's afraid. Good. Harry carried the diadem out of the room of hidden things and into the room of requirements training form, which the room obligingly reconfigured the moment Harry rephrased his need. The silver circles were still etched into the floor from the equinox working. Marge manifested, took one look at the diadem and began preparations. The extraction was faster this time. The fragment in the diadem wasn't integrated the way the one in Harry's scar had been. It was just placed, shoved into the artifact like a fist into a glove. Marge's ancient hands drew it out in under an hour, the fragment screaming and fighting and losing, into another ruined box, sealed, dead. The diadem itself, freed of its corruption, sang, not audibly magically, a clear, pure note of incredible intelligence and beauty, the essence of Rowan, a Ravenclaw's greatest creation, unclouded by Voldemort's taint for the first time in decades. "It's beautiful," Harry said, holding it up. The sapphire caught the light and scattered blue sparks. "It should be returned to Ravenclaw's house," Ireland said. "Phileas Flitwick is their head. He would understand its significance. After the war, for now it stays hidden." Harry shrunk the diadem and pocketed it. 3 Horcruxes dealt with diary, ring, scar. 2 contained scar fragment and diadem fragment. 3 left to find, the cup, the locket, and the snake. Things accelerated. Harry wrote to Ironclaw at Gringotts the following morning. A carefully worded letter that laid out the situation with the Lestrange vault, in terms the goblins would find most offensive. An unauthorized dark artifact, hidden within the bank's walls, constituting a violation of the Goblin-Wizard Treaty of 1743 that prohibited the storage of soul-bound objects without explicit goblin knowledge and consent. He cited the specific treaty clause. Doria had the entire document memorized and requested a formal meeting to discuss remediation. The response came within hours by Gringotts Owl, sealed in dark red wax. "Lord Potter Peverell, your allegation of treaty violation has been received and is being investigated with the urgency it deserves. Director Ragnarok has personally authorized an audit of the Lestrange vault. You are invited to attend the audit at your earliest convenience. The nation does not tolerate deception within its walls." Ironclaw, account manager, Potter Peverell Division. Harry read the letter at breakfast and allowed himself a small, fierce smile. The goblins were on it. The cup would be handled. Meanwhile, other threads were weaving. Dumbledore pulled Harry aside after a Thursday evening meeting, ostensibly about the Slughorn memory, which Harry was cultivating with patience and charm, attending Slug Club dinners and drawing the old professor out about his past. But the real conversation was about the cave. "I believe I've located Voldemort's hiding place for the locket," Dumbledore said. His cursed hand was worse. The blackness had crept past his wrist now, and he kept it hidden in his robes, but Harry could see the way he favored it. A seaside cave in the south of England. Tom Riddle visited it as a child with his orphanage. It holds dark significance for him. "When do you want to go?" "Soon. Within the week, I think. My condition is progressing and I'd rather not delay." Harry studied the old man. Dumbledore looked tired. Not just physically, spiritually tired, the way someone looks when they've been carrying a weight for too long and can feel the ground giving way beneath them. "We'll go," Harry said, "but I have conditions." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. "I'm not going as a student on a field trip. I'm going as your partner. If something goes wrong, I make decisions and you follow them. Your hand is compromised and your magic is declining. I won't pretend otherwise, and neither should you." A long pause. Then quietly, "Agreed. And when we get back, you tell me about the Elder Wand." The flinch was tiny, but Harry caught it. Dumbledore's eyes went sharp behind his spectacles. "What do you know about the Elder Wand?" "I know it's real, I know you have it, and I know Voldemort is going to come looking for it eventually." Harry held the old man's gaze. "Alliance means no secrets, remember." Another long pause, then a slow nod. "The Elder Wand, yes, we'll discuss it when we return." They set the cave expedition for the following weekend. In the intervening days, Harry continued training, studying, and building alliances. Daphne Greengrass had become a regular presence. Not a friend, not yet, but an interlocutor, a channel between Harry's emerging power block and the neutral families who were cautiously, tentatively moving toward his orbit. They met in the library, in empty classrooms, in the courtyard between classes, and their conversations ranged from Wisengamot procedure to ancient magical history, to the kind of sharp, sparring banter that happened when two clever people tested each other's edges. "You're not what I expected," she told him one evening, as they sat in a window alcove reviewing a draft charter for a neutral block voting agreement. Outside, rain was hammering the windows and the black lake was a sheet of gray. "What did you expect? A Gryffindor hero, all courage, no cunning, charge in, swing the sword, ask questions later. That was me a year ago. What changed?" Harry considered how much to share. "I found out that the people I trusted to protect me were using me instead, so I stopped waiting for protection and built my own." Daphne looked at him, and something in her Wintersea eyes shifted. Not warmth exactly, Daphne Greengrass didn't do warmth the way most people did it, but respect, recognition, one survivor seeing another. "My father says you're the most dangerous person in Wizarding Britain right now," she said. "Not because of your power, though that's obviously considerable, because you're unpredictable. Neither side knows what to do with you." "Good. He also says," she paused, and for the first time a crack appeared in her composure. "He also says that if the Dark Lord wins, the neutral families will be punished for not joining sooner. That neutrality only works if there's someone strong enough to enforce it. There is now." She looked at him, he looked at her. The rain hammered the windows. "I'll hold you to that," she said, and the crack sealed over, and she was composed Daphne Greengrass again. But something had been exchanged that couldn't be taken back. Malfoy came to him on a Tuesday. Harry was leaving the training room, the room of requirements version, not the Potter Manor one, at 11:30 at night, tired and sore from 3 hours of combat practice with Viola. He came around a corner and nearly walked into Malfoy, who was standing in the middle of the 7th-floor corridor, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "Potter," Malfoy's voice was raw. You said there were other options." Harry stopped. "I did. My mother." Malfoy's composure cracked wide open, and underneath was a terrified boy. "He's got my mother, not in prison, not directly, but if I fail, he'll kill her. He told me he'd let Greyback, he couldn't finish." "What's the mission, Draco?" Malfoy flinched at the first name. Then slowly, like every word cost him something vital, "He wants me to kill Dumbledore, and to find a way to let Death Eaters into the castle." The corridor was very quiet. "A vanishing cabinet," Malfoy continued. "In the room of hidden things, it's paired with one in Borgin and Burke's. I've been trying to repair it all term. If I fix it, they come through. If I don't," he swallowed, "he'll kill Mum." Harry stood very still. The spirits were silent, waiting. This was his call. "The vanishing cabinet," Harry said. "You've been working on it in the room of requirement." "Yes, show me." They went to the room. Malfoy's face was chalk-white and his hands shook as he paced before the wall. The room opened to the hidden things form, and Malfoy led Harry through the aisles, past the spot where the diadem had been, past mountains of junk, to a tall black cabinet standing alone against a wall. Harry looked at it. The vanishing cabinet was a paired transport system. Whatever was placed in one cabinet appeared in its twin. If this one was repaired and the other was in Borgin and Burke's, it was a direct pathway past every ward and protection Hogwarts had. "I can destroy it," Harry said. Malfoy went even whiter, which shouldn't have been possible. "If you destroy it, he'll know I failed. Mum, I didn't say I'd leave your mother unprotected." Harry turned to face him. "I'm going to offer you something, and you're going to think it's a trap, and it isn't. I'm offering you sanctuary, for you and your mother. Under the protection of the House of Potter Peverell." Malfoy stared. "You're what?" "Ancient magical law. A lord of an ancient and noble house can grant sanctuary to anyone who asks for it. The person and their immediate family are placed under the house's protection, backed by blood magic. Breaking sanctuary is one of the oldest crimes in wizarding law. Even Voldemort would hesitate to violate it openly. It would undermine the pure blood traditions he claims to champion." Doria was feeding him this in real time, and he was grateful for every word. Malfoy was a pure blood. He understood these traditions. Harry could see the knowledge clicking into place behind those gray eyes. "You do that," Malfoy said. "For me, for a Malfoy. For a 16-year-old kid being forced to commit murder by a maniac who's holding his mother hostage. Yeah, I would." Malfoy's face crumbled. Not dramatically, he was still a Malfoy, still had pride and composure bred into his bones, but the mask fell away, and what was left was exhaustion and relief and a grief that went deeper than anything Harry had expected. "I don't deserve, probably not, but I'm offering anyway. What do you say?" Malfoy looked at the vanishing cabinet, looked at Harry, looked at the ring on Harry's hand, which was pulsing with a faint silver light. "How do we get my mother out?" Harry smiled. It was sharp and confident and backed by the collected power of 1,000 years. "Leave that to me." He raised his wand and obliterated the vanishing cabinet. The explosion was silent, contained by the room's wards, but the cabinet disintegrated into splinters and dust and nothing. The pathway into Hogwarts died. Malfoy flinched. Then he straightened his spine, set his jaw, and looked at Harry with an expression that wasn't friendship or gratitude or trust, not yet, but the beginning of something that could become all three. "What now?" "Now I write a letter, and then we go get your mother." They left the room of hidden things together, and behind them, the dust of the destroyed cabinet settled over the aisles of forgotten things, covering history that no longer mattered with the residue of a future that had just changed irrevocably. 2 days later, Narcissa Malfoy arrived at Potter Manor, escorted by Dobby the house elf, who had been ecstatic to assist in rescuing the mother of young Master Draco from the bad snake man, and was placed under the Potter Peverell sanctuary wards. The extraction had been surgical. Doria had coordinated it, using her knowledge of the Black family properties and their ward structures to create a window in Malfoy Manor's defenses. Narcissa had walked out of her own front door at 3 in the morning, touched a portkey Harry had crafted under Ioland's guidance, and landed in the Welsh hills before anyone knew she was gone. Draco received the confirmation in the morning, a single line in Harry's handwriting passed to him in the corridor. "She's safe. She says she loves you and to eat more." Malfoy read the note, folded it carefully, and put it in his pocket. When he looked up, his eyes were red, but his face was steady. "Thank you," he said. The words sounded like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep and painful. "You're welcome. Now, tell me everything you know about what Voldemort's planning." And Malfoy did. The intelligence was gold. Voldemort's inner circle structure, his communication methods, the locations of several Death Eater safe houses, and most importantly, the snake's habits, Nagini's routine, where she went when she wasn't with Voldemort, how closely she was guarded. Not enough to act on immediately, but enough to plan with. That night, Harry sat in the room of requirement with the sealed Horcrux boxes, 2 of them now, the scar fragment and the diadem fragment, and thought about what was coming. Dumbledore's cave expedition was in 3 days. The Gringotts meeting about the Lestrange vault was scheduled for the following week, during Hogsmeade weekend. The political coalition was solidifying, with 3 more neutral families reaching out through Daphne's channels. And Voldemort, somewhere out in the dark, was about to discover that his Horcruxes were disappearing. His spy in Hogwarts had been turned, and the boy he dismissed as a lucky child was coming for him with the collected fury of 1,000 years of Potter women at his back. "Are you ready?" Ioland asked. Harry touched the ring. Felt the spirits, all of them, every mother, wife, lover, protector, humming with power and purpose and love. "Yeah," he said, "I'm ready." Somewhere in the dark English countryside, in a manor house that had once belonged to the Riddle family, Lord Voldemort sat in a high-backed chair and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. His hand went to his chest. The locket was there, hanging against his skin, its familiar weight a constant reminder of his immortality. But something was wrong. The connection he maintained to his Horcruxes, a subtle awareness, a resonance like hearing distant bells, had changed. 2 notes were missing. 2 bells had gone silent. The ring. He'd known about the ring. Dumbledore had found it, destroyed it. Infuriating but manageable. 6 anchors were more than enough. But now another was gone. The note that had been the diadem, hidden in Hogwarts, safe behind 1,000 years of magical protection, had vanished from the cord. Voldemort stood. Nagini coiled at his feet, sensing her master's agitation. Someone, he said, and his voice was the whisper of a blade being drawn, is hunting my immortality. He reached for the connection he'd maintained with the boy, the scar, the link, his window into Potter's mind, and found nothing. Where there had been a door, there was a wall. Where there had been a channel, there was silence. The connection was simply gone. Lord Voldemort stood in the dark of the Riddle house and felt, for the first time in decades, genuinely afraid. Something had changed. Something was coming. And for once he didn't know what it was. Chapter 5. The living and the dead. The cave smelled like salt and rot and something older than both. Harry stood at the mouth of it, the sea crashing against the rocks below, and felt the dark magic pouring out of the opening like breath from a diseased lung. Beside him, Dumbledore was breathing harder than the climb warranted. The cursed hand was worse. The blackness had reached his elbow, hidden under his sleeve but visible in the way he held the arm, stiff and slightly apart from his body, as though it belonged to someone else. "You're sure about this?" Harry said. "Not a question. The locket is here, I'm certain of it." Harry looked at the cave entrance, then back at Dumbledore. The old man's face was set with the particular determination of someone racing a clock they couldn't see but could feel ticking in their bones. A year, he'd said. That had been 2 months ago. The hand said it might be less. "Stay behind me," Harry said. Dumbledore blinked. "Harry, you're compromised, Professor. Your wand hand is your right and your right arm is dying. Your magic is being drained by the curse Snape is fighting to contain. I can feel it from here. Your magical output is maybe 60% of what it should be." Harry held up a hand before Dumbledore could argue. "I'm not being cruel, I'm being accurate. You know this place. You guide, I act. That's the deal." For a moment Dumbledore looked like he might protest. Then the fight went out of him, not all at once, but in a slow deflation, the way a man who's been standing tall through sheer will finally acknowledges that the ground is tilting. "Very well," he said quietly. "Follow the cave to the back wall. There will be a blood payment required for entry." They entered. The cave narrowed immediately, the ceiling dropping until Harry had to duck, the walls slick with moisture and something that glowed faintly green in the dark. Harry cast a wandless lumos. The light that sprang from his palm was steady and bright, and he saw Dumbledore note the wandless casting with a complex expression. The back wall was smooth stone, unremarkable except for the way magic clung to it like oil on water. "Blood," Dumbledore said. "Tom always did favor blood magic. A sacrifice to enter, not much, but the principle mattered to him." Harry drew his wand and made a small cut on his left palm. The blood hit the stone, and the wall dissolved into an archway that opened onto a vast underground lake, black and still as glass. In the center, barely visible in the darkness, a tiny island glowed with eerie green light. Harry extended his senses the way Catherine had taught him. The lake was thick with magic, layers of it dark and vicious, radiating hostility, and underneath the surface. "Inferi," Harry said. "The lake is full of them." Dumbledore nodded. "Tom populated it with his victims. They will rise if provoked by disturbance of the water, by light, by the removal of the Horcrux." Harry looked at the black water and felt the ring pulse on his finger. The spirits were awake and alert, pressing against the boundary of manifestation. Viola was practically vibrating with readiness. Marge was murmuring about death magic and corruption. And Iolanthe was very quiet, very focused, studying the cave's magical architecture with the intensity of someone reading a language she'd helped create. "The magic here is crude," Iolanthe said. "Powerful, yes, but crude. Voldemort understands death magic the way a child understands fire. He knows it burns, he knows how to make it burn others, but he doesn't understand its nature. The Inferi are enslaved corpses, bound by fear and force. They can be released." Released how? Harry thought. Fire, but not just any fire. Fire with intent. Fire that carries the will to free, not just to destroy. The old funeral rites, cremation magic. I can teach you, but it must be done in the moment. Can you learn that fast? Try me. Harry turned to Dumbledore. "I'm going to the island, stay here." "Harry, the boat, there's a boat hidden at the shore, enchanted to carry one wizard across." "I don't need a boat." Harry stepped onto the water, not into it, onto it. The surface tension held under his feet, reinforced by a charm Viola had taught him 3 weeks ago, a battle mage's trick from the Goblin Wars, designed for fighting across rivers and marshes. He walked across the Black Lake like it was solid ground, each step sending faint ripples across the glassy surface, and the Inferi below stirred and shifted but didn't rise. Not yet. They were waiting for the trigger. The island was 10 feet across, bare stone, with a basin at its center filled with glowing green liquid. The locket sat at the bottom of the basin, visible through the potion, gold chain coiled like a sleeping serpent. Harry looked at the potion, extended his senses. Poison, Marge said immediately, designed to be consumed. It creates despair, forces the drinker to relive their worst memories, their deepest fears until they're broken. And it creates a maddening thirst that drives them to the water which wakes the Inferi. Can you neutralize it? Not quickly enough. But I can shield you from its effects while you drain it. The potion must be drunk. That's the enchantment's requirement. Vanishing it won't work. Scooping it aside won't work. But if you drink it while I hold your mind steady, do it. Harry conjured a goblet, simple, silver, functional, and dipped it into the green potion. The moment the liquid touched the cup, the cave seemed to darken, the temperature dropping, the ambient magic pressing in from all sides. He drank. The potion hit his stomach like liquid ice and tried to claw its way into his mind. Memories surged. The cupboard, the graveyard, Sirius falling through the veil, Cedric's empty eyes, but Marge was there. Her ancient presence wrapping around his consciousness like armor, and the memories broke against her like waves against a seawall. He felt them, acknowledged them, and let them pass. He drank again, and again. Cup after cup, the green potion burning his throat and churning his gut, while Marge held his mind and Doria reinforced his occlumency barriers and Euphemia poured warmth into him like sunlight through clouds. It was agony, and it was manageable, and it was nothing compared to having a soul fragment ripped from his skull. The basin emptied. Harry dropped the goblet, his hands shaking, sweat running down his face, and reached down to grab the locket. The moment his fingers closed around the gold chain, the Inferi woke. The lake erupted. Hundreds of corpses, pale and bloated and dead-eyed, surging up through the black water like a ghastly crop breaking soil. They came from every direction, hands reaching, jaws gaping, moving with the terrible mechanical purpose of things that had been given one instruction and would follow it until they were destroyed. Behind him, on the shore, he heard Dumbledore shout something and saw the flash of fire magic. A ring of flame conjured around the old man's position, holding back the Inferi that were climbing the rocks toward him. But Dumbledore's fire was weaker than it should have been, flickering, the cursed hand sapping his power. Harry stood on the island and felt the Inferi closing in from the water on all sides, dozens of dead hands reaching for the stone edge, and he thought of what Iolanthe had told him. Fire with intent, not destruction. Release. He planted his feet, raised both hands, no wand, just his palms open and his magic surging through channels that were wider and cleaner than they'd ever been, and called fire. Not fiend fire, not conjured flame. Something older, wilder, drawn from a tradition that predated wand magic by millennia. Marge's people had burned their dead on hilltops, freeing spirits with fire and song, and the magic of that ancient rite flowed through Harry's blood now, channeled through the ring, amplified by the spirit's collective will. White fire erupted from his hands. It cascaded outward in a wave that swept across the lake's surface like dawn breaking, and where it touched the Inferi, they didn't burn, they unraveled. The dark magic holding corpse to animation, soul to servitude, simply dissolved. Bodies that had been puppeted for decades relaxed, went still, and sank beneath the water. Faces that had been locked in rictus horror softened into peace. Harry saw a woman's face in the nearest wave of Inferi, young, dark-haired, terrified in death. And as the white fire reached her, the terror melted away, replaced by something that looked like gratitude before the body slipped beneath the surface and was gone. The fire swept the lake clean in under 30 seconds. Every Inferius, every corpse, every enslaved dead thing released, freed, returned to the rest they should have had. The cave went quiet. The green glow was gone. The lake was just water now, dark and deep but clean. Harry stood on the island, breathing hard, the locket clutched in his fist, and heard Dumbledore whisper from the shore. "What in Merlin's name was that?" "Cremation rite," Harry said. His voice echoed across the still water. "Old magic, very old." He walked back across the lake, each step steady, the water calm beneath his feet, and stepped onto the shore beside Dumbledore. The old man was staring at him. The ring of fire he'd conjured was sputtering out, and in its dying light, Dumbledore's face was a landscape of awe and something that might have been fear. "That was not taught at Hogwarts," Dumbledore said. "Number it wasn't. The magic you just performed, the control, the power, the intent, Harry, that was master-level magic. Beyond master-level. I have seen perhaps 3 wizards in my lifetime capable of something approaching what you just did, and I was one of them." Harry met his eyes. "You wanted me to be your weapon, Professor. Turns out I'm something better. I'm my own." Dumbledore closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears and something that looked, for the first time, like genuine hope. "Yes," he said. "You are." They left the cave, apparated to Hogsmeade. Walked up the road to Hogwarts in silence, the locket in Harry's pocket pulsing with dark malice against his hip, and the stars wheeling overhead in the cold, clear sky. At the gates, Dumbledore stopped. "The Elder Wand," he said. "You asked about it." Harry waited. "I won it from Gellert Grindelwald in 1945. I've carried it ever since." Dumbledore drew his wand, long, pale, set with clusters of elderberries at the handle, and held it up in the starlight. "The Wand of Destiny, the Death Stick, the most powerful wand in existence and the most dangerous. Because it changes allegiance. Because it demands conflict. The wand's power comes at a cost. It can only be truly mastered by defeating its previous master. This creates an endless chain of violence. Every owner is eventually challenged. Every owner eventually falls." Dumbledore looked at the wand with an expression of deep weariness. "I have held it for 50 years, and in that time I have been challenged 6 times. I defeated each challenger, but the wand remembers every one of them, and it hungers for the next. Voldemort will come for it," Harry said, "when he figures out what it is and where it is. Yes, he's already searching. He knows the legend, and he's tracing the wand's history. Eventually he'll trace it to Grindelwald, and from Grindelwald to me. What happens when he comes?" Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. "I am dying, Harry. Within months, probably. If Voldemort finds me before I die naturally, he takes the wand by force and becomes its master. If I die naturally, the wand's power dies with me or passes to whoever technically defeated me last." Harry's mind raced. The implications branched out like a tree of possibilities, each one carrying different consequences. If Dumbledore died undefeated, the wand's allegiance chain might break. If someone else defeated Dumbledore first, even symbolically, even in a minor way, Malfoy, Harry said suddenly. Dumbledore blinked. "What?" "Draco Malfoy. His mission was to kill you. If he'd succeeded, or even disarmed you, the wand's allegiance would have shifted to him, and Voldemort would have eventually taken it from Malfoy, completing the chain." Harry's stomach turned. That's why Voldemort gave Malfoy the mission. Not just as punishment. He knew about the Elder Wand. He's been planning this. Dumbledore went very still. "I had not considered that angle. You need to start thinking like a Slytherin professor." A ghost of a smile. "Perhaps I do." They parted at the entrance hall, Dumbledore to his office, moving slowly, favoring his cursed arm, looking every one of his 150 years. Harry watched him go and felt the strange cocktail of emotions that Dumbledore always provoked in him. Anger and pity and grudging respect, and the ache of knowing that this brilliant, terrible, well-meaning old man had done his best and his best hadn't been good enough. "He's running out of time," Euphemia said softly. "I know. What will you do about the wand?" Harry thought about it as he climbed the stairs to Gryffindor Tower. The Elder Wand was a problem, a weapon that created conflict by its very nature, that corrupted the chain of ownership, that Voldemort was hunting with increasing desperation. It needed to be neutralized, not destroyed. Harry suspected it couldn't be easily destroyed, given its nature, but removed from play. "Iolanthe," he thought, "the Elder Wand. Your great-uncle Antioch made it. Is there a way to break the allegiance chain without destroying the wand?" The wand responds to defeat, Iolanthe said slowly. But it responds to a specific kind of defeat, forcible, combative, a clear expression of dominance. If the current master were to surrender the wand voluntarily, freely, with no coercion, the wand would have no new master. The chain would break. Theoretically, no one has ever tried. Every owner of the Elder Wand has clung to it. The power is addictive, and the wand encourages possessiveness. But Dumbledore is dying, and he spent 50 years carrying a weapon he never wanted. If anyone would surrender it willingly. Harry filed the thought away for later. He had the locket to deal with first. In the dormitory, after Ron and Neville and Dean and Seamus were asleep, Harry pulled the locket from his pocket and examined it. Heavy gold, ornate, with Slytherin's serpentine S in glittering green stones on the front. He could feel the soul fragment inside, stronger than the diadems, more aggressive, pushing against its container with active malevolence. The locket seemed to pulse in his hand, warm and heavy, and he could feel it trying to influence him. Subtle emotional pushes, a creeping despair, a whisper of "you're not strong enough, you'll fail, they'll all die." Harry looked at the locket and thought about Tom Riddle, a boy in an orphanage, afraid and alone and angry, who discovered he had power and used it to make sure he would never be afraid again. A boy who was so terrified of death that he tore his own soul into pieces and scattered them across the world. There was a mirror there if Harry looked hard enough. A boy in a cupboard, afraid and alone and angry. The same starting point, divergent paths. The difference was love, not an abstraction, not a concept, but the specific, concrete, blood and bone love of the women who had woven themselves into Harry's magic through the ring. Voldemort had had no one. Harry had everyone. He took the locket to the room of requirement the next morning, before dawn. Marge performed the extraction with the same methodical care she'd applied to the diadem. This fragment fought harder. The locket's defenses were vicious, lashing out with dark magic that cracked the stone floor and sent waves of cold through the room. But Marge was relentless, and the spirits backed her with their collective power. And after 90 minutes of grueling work, the fragment was separated, sealed in a third ruined box, and the locket of Slytherin lay empty and gleaming on the floor. 4 down, 2 to go. The cup in the Lestrange vault. And Nagini. The Gringotts' visit happened on Hogsmeade weekend. Harry separated from Ron and Hermione in the village. They knew where he was going and why. And Hermione had argued for coming along until Harry pointed out that this was goblin business, conducted under the old pacts, and bringing non-Peverell companions would undermine the formality of the arrangement. She'd accepted this grudgingly and gone to Honeydukes with Ron, who had accepted it immediately because Honeydukes. Neville came. Harry had thought about it and decided that bringing the Longbottom heir, the other boy from the prophecy, the son of 2 Aurors who had been tortured into insanity by a Lestrange, carried symbolic weight that the goblins and anyone watching would understand. They apparated to the Gringotts' front steps. The guards recognized Harry immediately and ushered them inside without the usual security checkpoint. Ironclaw was waiting in the underground office, and he was not alone. Director Ragnarok sat behind the desk. Harry had never seen a goblin like Ragnarok. He was ancient. How ancient was impossible to guess, with deep-set eyes that glittered like polished obsidian, and a face carved from experience the way a cliff face was carved by centuries of weather. He wore armor, not a suit. Actual goblin-forged armor, dark metal etched with runes, over a tunic of deep crimson. A sword hung at his hip, short, broad-bladed, and radiating a magical aura that made the hairs on Harry's arms stand up. "Lord Potter Peverell," Ragnarok said, and his voice was gravel and iron. "And Lord Longbottom, sit." They sat. "The audit of the Lestrange vault has been completed," Ragnarok said without preamble. "Goblins didn't do small talk. Your allegation is confirmed. A soul-bound artifact was placed in the vault without the nation's knowledge or consent, in direct violation of the Treaty of 1743, Article 14, which prohibits the storage of parasitic magical constructs within Gringotts wards." He placed a golden cup on the desk, small, 2-handled, with a badger engraved on the side. Hufflepuff's cup. Harry could feel the soul fragment inside it writhing. The Lestrange accounts have been frozen pending further investigation, Ragnarok continued. The cup is forfeit. As the party who identified the violation and as the holder of the Peverell Pact, the artifact is released to your custody. He fixed Harry with those obsidian eyes. What do you intend to do with it? Remove the soul fragment and seal it, the same process I've used for the other Horcruxes I've recovered. Ragnarok studied him. Then, you have recovered others. 3 fragments sealed plus 1 destroyed years ago. This will be the 5th. How many remain? 1 object. And the primary soul, Voldemort himself. A silence settled over the office that was thick with significance. Ragnarok looked at Ironclaw. Ironclaw looked at Ragnarok. Something passed between them, a communication in the subtle goblin way, expressed through micro-movements of the face and hands that was as complex as any spoken language. The nation has no love for the one who calls himself Lord Voldemort, Ragnarok said. He has violated our treaties, murdered our people, and treated the goblin race as beneath his notice. This is offensive to us. He leaned forward. The Peverell Pact is ancient, older than Gringotts, older than the Ministry. It binds the Peverell line and the Goblin Nation in mutual defense and mutual respect. You have honored that pact today by bringing this violation to our attention, rather than simply stealing from our vaults. The thought never crossed my mind, Harry said, which was true. Number it wouldn't have, you are a Peverell. Ragnarok stood. The armored goblin was barely 4 feet tall, but in that moment he filled the room. The nation acknowledges its debt. When the time comes to strike at the one who has violated our trust, call upon us. The goblin warriors will answer. Harry stood and bowed, the deep, respectful bow that he'd learned meant something to goblins, warrior to warrior. Director Ragnarok. The House of Potter Peverell is honored by your friendship. Ragnarok's mouth twitched. On any other face it would have been a smile. On a goblin director in full armor, it was a treaty being signed. Neville bowed too, and Ragnarok acknowledged him with a nod. Longbottom, your parents were friends to the nation, we remember. They left Gringotts with Hufflepuff's cup wrapped in silk in Harry's pocket and the promise of goblin warriors at his back. Neville was quiet as they walked down the steps into the weak autumn sunshine. Harry, Neville said, when you said call upon us, you and the goblins, you're building an army. I'm building a coalition. Army implies one commander giving orders. This is allies choosing to fight together. The goblins, the neutral families, your spirit council, McGonagall, Malfoy. Neville shook his head. 6 months ago you were a traumatized kid being manipulated by everyone around you. Now you're what? A general. I'm a Potter. Turns out that means something. Neville looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, wide and fierce. The smile of a boy who was becoming a man in the crucible of a war he hadn't chosen but would not back down from. Yeah, he said. It does. They apparated back to Hogsmeade, rejoined the others, and spent the afternoon doing normal things, butter beer at the 3 Broomsticks, wandering the shops, laughing at something Ron said that was simultaneously stupid and brilliant. Harry let himself be a teenager for a few hours, because Euphemia was right about balance, and because the people around him deserved a friend, not just a wartime leader. Daphne found him outside Scrivenshafts, where he'd gone alone to buy new quills. She fell into step beside him without preamble, matching his pace, her wintersea eyes scanning the crowd with the habitual wariness of someone who'd grown up in a world where the wrong word at the wrong party could destroy a family. My father received your latest letter, she said. He's bringing the Zabinis and the Davises into the formal agreement. That gives you the neutral bloc, 8 families, 17 combined Wisengamot votes. Good. It's more than good. Combined with your 2 hereditary seats and the alliances you're building with the progressive families, the Longbottoms, the Bones, you're approaching a voting majority independent of both Dumbledore's faction and the Death Eater sympathizers. That's the idea. Daphne stopped walking. Harry stopped too, turning to face her. They were in a quiet side street away from the main shopping crowd. The October wind tugged at her hair, pulling strands loose from her clasp. You're going to confront him, she said. Voldemort, not someday, soon. When the time is right. The neutral families need to know. If you fall, if this fails, they need to have a contingency. I won't fall. Everyone thinks that until they do. Harry looked at her. She was afraid, not for herself, but for her family, for the fragile structure of safety she was helping build. The neutral families had survived by hedging their bets, and they were betting on Harry now, and if he lost, they lost everything. Daphne. He said her name carefully, giving it weight. I have advantages that Voldemort doesn't know about and can't prepare for. I have allies he can't fathom. And I have something he has never had and never will, people who love me enough to come back from the dead to fight beside me. I am not going to fall. She searched his face. Whatever she found there must have been enough, because some of the tension left her shoulders and she nodded once. I believe you, she said. God help me, I actually believe you. Something passed between them in that moment, not a declaration, not a confession, but an acknowledgement. A recognition that they had become more to each other than political allies, and that neither of them was ready to name it yet, and that was fine because there was a war to win first. Come on, Harry said. Ron's probably bought the entire Honeydew stock by now. The faintest smile touched her lips. Will he share? Not voluntarily, but I have leverage. They walked back to the main street, side by side, not quite touching, and the autumn sunlight caught the ring on Harry's finger and made it gleam. Marge extracted the cup's fragment that night. The fifth sealed box joined the others in a hidden compartment in the room of requirement, warded by Harry and Catherine together, protected by enchantments old enough to predate the castle they were housed in. 5 Horcruxes dealt with. 1 remained, Nagini. And then Voldemort himself. The attack came 2 weeks later. Not at Hogwarts. Voldemort wasn't ready for a direct assault on the castle, not yet. At Hogsmeade, on a Saturday afternoon when the village was full of students, when the streets were crowded with teenagers buying sweets and joke items, and trying to hold hands without their friends noticing. Harry felt it before anyone else did. The wards, not Hogwarts wards but his own, layered over the village in subtle, nearly undetectable threads during his weekend visits, screamed a warning. Dark magic. Multiple sources. Approaching from the north, moving fast. He was in the 3 broomsticks with Ron, Hermione, and Neville. He stood so abruptly his chair clattered backward. Death Eaters. Incoming, 30 seconds. Ron's hand went to his wand. Hermione went white but didn't freeze. Neville was already on his feet, wand drawn, jaw set. Hermione, get to the school, tell McGonagall. Ron, Neville with me. Harry was moving before he finished speaking, shouldering through the pub's door into the street. Hogsmeade's main street was full of students, laughing, chatting, blissfully unaware. Harry raised his wand and cast, not a spell but a signal, a flare of brilliant white light that shot into the sky and exploded into the shape of a stag. The DA signal. Every member of Dumbledore's army who saw it would know what it meant. Danger, rally, fight. The first Death Eaters apparated into the far end of the street 3 seconds later. There were maybe 20 of them, masked, robed, wands out, moving with the coordinated discipline of a trained strike force. They fanned out across the street, cutting off the northern exit, and the lead figure, tall, heavyset, moving with brutal confidence, raised his wand and fired a killing curse into the air as a calling card. Students screamed. Panic erupted. Kids were running in every direction, some toward the school, some into shops, some just running blind. Get to Hogwarts. Harry bellowed, his voice amplified by a sonorous charm that he cast wandlessly. Everyone move. DA members to me. They came. Not all of them, some were too far away, some were frozen with fear, but enough. Ginny Weasley burst from Zonko's with her wand already casting. Luna Lovegood drifted out of a side street with the serene expression of someone who found mortal danger mildly interesting. Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas came sprinting from the direction of the Shrieking Shack. And others, Parvati Patil, Lavender Brown, Ernie Macmillan, Susan Bones, converging on Harry's position with the muscle memory of a year of secret training. Shield formation, Harry shouted. Protect the students. Get them behind us. The DA members formed a line across the street, ragged, imperfect, but there, and threw up shield charms as the first wave of curses came streaking toward them. Dark magic splashed against the overlapping shields in bursts of red and green and purple, and the shields held because Harry had been training these people since 5th year, and some lessons stuck. Harry stepped through the shield line and walked toward the Death Eaters. He didn't run. He didn't cast. He walked, steady and calm, and the ring on his finger blazed with silver light, and he felt the spirits surge to the surface, not manifesting, not yet, but there, their collective power flowing into him, filling his channels, elevating his magic from impressive to transcendent. The lead Death Eater, Dolohov, Harry realized, recognizing the way he moved, fired a curse at him. Purple-white vicious, the same curse that had nearly killed Hermione at the Ministry. Harry caught it, not blocked, not deflected, caught. He raised his hand and the curse slammed into his palm and stopped, its energy contained in a sphere of compressed magic that crackled between his fingers. He held it for a moment, long enough for every Death Eater and every student on the street to see, and then crushed it. The dark magic dissipated in a shower of harmless sparks. The Death Eaters faltered. Harry could feel their fear, not through any mental connection, just through the sudden, palpable uncertainty that radiated from a group of people who had expected terrified children and found something else entirely. "You're going to want to leave," Harry said, and his voice carried down the street without magical amplification, calm and conversational and backed by the weight of 1,000 years. Someone in the back of the Death Eater group fired a killing curse. Harry sidestepped it, Viola's footwork drilled into him until it was reflex and didn't bother retaliating. Another curse came. He deflected it with a wave of his hand. Another. He moved through them the way water moves around stones, untouchable, unhurried. Then he decided the demonstration was over. He raised both hands and the spirits manifested. Not all of them. That would have been overkill. But Viola, in her battle-scarred leather and ancient runes, materialized on his right flank. Doria, Ice Gold, and Black Family Lethal appeared on his left. Behind them, 5 more spirits, warriors and protectors from across the centuries, shimmered into visibility, translucent and terrible, their spectral forms blazing with silver-white light. 7 warrior spirits flanking the last Potter on a street in Hogsmeade, facing 20 Death Eaters who had expected to terrorize school children. The Death Eaters broke. Not all at once, the disciplined ones held for a few seconds, firing curses that the spirits batted aside like insects. But the fear was overwhelming. These weren't ghosts. Ghosts were harmless, familiar. These were presences, radiating power and malice, and the focused fury of women who had spent centuries watching over a family and had finally been given the chance to act. Viola hit the nearest Death Eater with a spell that Harry didn't recognize, something old and brutal that slammed the man off his feet and sent him tumbling 20 yards down the street, his mask cracking, his wand flying from his hand. Doria took down 2 more with a precision curse chain that would have made Snape weep, each spell placed exactly where it needed to be, disabling without killing, because Doria was a strategist and dead Death Eaters were less useful than captured ones. The other spirits engaged with similar efficiency. Each one fought differently, different eras, different styles, different traditions, but they fought together with the coordination of a family that had been practicing in Harry's training sessions for months. Harry moved through the melee like a conductor through an orchestra. His magic flowed outward, supporting the spirits, shielding the DA members, herding the fleeing students toward safety. He wasn't fighting the Death Eaters directly. He didn't need to. His spirits were handling the combat while he managed the battlefield. But Dolohov wasn't done. The Death Eater had regrouped, pulled 3 others around him, and was pushing forward through the spirits' assault with the grim determination of a veteran who'd survived 2 wars. He fired a curse at the DA's shield line, not at the shields, but at the ground in front of them, blasting a crater that sent students stumbling. Harry turned, raised a hand, and hit Dolohov with a binding curse so powerful that the man's wand arm snapped to his side, his legs fused together, and he toppled like a felled tree, wrapped in bands of silver magic that tightened every time he struggled. "I told you to leave," Harry said. The remaining Death Eaters disapparated. 12 of the 20 were down, bound, stunned, or unconscious. 8 escaped. The street was cratered and scorched but intact. The students were shaken but safe. No casualties. The spirits faded back into the ring, their work done, and Harry stood alone in the middle of Hogsmeade's main street, surrounded by bound Death Eaters and staring students and the fading silver afterglow of 1,000 years of love made into weaponry. The silence lasted about 3 seconds before it shattered into chaos. Cheers, crying, questions, 100 voices all at once. McGonagall arrived with a phalanx of professors and Aurors 30 seconds later, took one look at the scene, and fixed Harry with a stare that was equal parts amazement and exasperation. "Mr. Potter, report. 20 Death Eaters, 12 captured, no student casualties. The village wards I installed detected them before they breached the perimeter." "The village wards you installed?" "Yes, ma'am, supplementary. I didn't tamper with the existing ones." McGonagall looked at the bound Death Eaters, at the craters in the street, at the students who were looking at Harry like he'd just split the Red Sea. "In my office, 1 hour." She turned to the Aurors. "Secure the prisoners. I want identification on every one of them before nightfall." The hour in McGonagall's office was actually more like 3 hours, and it involved not just McGonagall but Dumbledore, Snape, and a frazzled Kingsley Shacklebolt who'd been pulled from whatever he was doing at the Ministry. Harry told them what happened, the sanitized version, omitting the spirit's specifics but acknowledging that he'd manifested family magic in the fight. "Spectral entities," Snape said, his black eyes boring into Harry. "The Aurors are reporting spectral entities fighting alongside you. Aspects of the Potter Peverell legacy magic, ancient, bound to my bloodline, not a threat to the school." "Not a threat," Snape repeated flatly. "You deployed an unknown magical force in a village full of students, and those students are alive because of it." Snape's jaw tightened. Dumbledore raised a hand. "The results speak for themselves, Severus. 12 Death Eaters captured, no student casualties, and the attack was repelled in under 5 minutes. Whatever the nature of Harry's family magic, it was effective and controlled." He looked at Harry. "Though I think, Harry, that the wizarding world is going to have a great many questions about what it saw today. Let them ask. I'm done hiding." Dumbledore nodded slowly. "Yes, I believe you are." The Daily Prophet's coverage the next morning was, predictably, sensational. "Boy Who Lived DEFEATS 20 Death EATRS, Spectral Warriors Fight Alongside Potter Heir." The article was breathless and inaccurate in several details, but the core message was clear. Harry Potter had power that no one had anticipated, and he had used it to protect people. The response was seismic. Letters poured in, hundreds of them from all over magical Britain. Families pledging support. Students writing to say they felt safe for the first time since the war began. Pureblood houses that had been on the fence throwing their weight behind the Potter Peverell coalition. The Ministry, which had spent years alternately celebrating and condemning Harry, suddenly found itself facing a political force it couldn't manipulate or ignore. Scrimgeour, the Minister for Magic, requested a meeting. Harry declined. "Let him come to you," Doria advised. "You don't go to the Minister comes to you." And 4 days later, Scrimgeour did. He arrived at Hogwarts looking harried and determined, and Harry met him in an empty classroom with Neville at his side and the ring pulsing warmth on his finger. "Lord Potter Peverell," Scrimgeour said, "the Ministry would like to discuss a partnership. The Ministry would like to use my name and my power to prop up its failing credibility," Harry corrected pleasantly. "The answer is number, but I'll offer you something better. Stay out of my way, and when I end this war, the Ministry can take the credit." Scrimgeour sputtered. "You can't just. A private citizen can't wage a war. I'm not a private citizen. I'm a lord of 2 ancient and noble houses with a Wisengamot majority coalition and the support of the Goblin Nation. What I am is the only person in Britain who's actually doing something about Voldemort instead of printing wanted posters and hoping for the best." The meeting lasted 20 minutes. Scrimgeour left with nothing he'd wanted, and a growing suspicion that the political landscape had shifted permanently beneath his feet. Harry sat in the empty classroom afterward, alone except for the spirits, and allowed himself a moment of exhaustion. The Hogsmeade battle had been a turning point, not just militarily but personally. He'd revealed himself to the world. There was no going back to being the quiet, uncertain boy who hid behind Dumbledore's reputation. He was a player now, a power in his own right, and every faction in Wizarding Britain was scrambling to figure out how to deal with him. One Horcrux left, Ironclaw said quietly. Nagini. And then Voldemort himself. The snake stays with him. You can't get to one without facing the other. I know. Harry touched the ring. I'm not afraid. I know you're not. That's what concerns me. Harry smiled. Don't worry, I'm not going to be reckless. I'm going to be thorough. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and went to find his friends. There was planning to do, training to continue, and a war to end. But first, dinner. Euphemia would insist. He was halfway to the great hall when Dumbledore found him. The old man was leaning against a wall in a corridor Harry rarely used, and he looked diminished. Smaller than Harry remembered. Cursed hand was fully black now, the darkness creeping past his elbow toward his shoulder, and his face was gaunt, the skin papery and thin. Harry, his voice was a thread. I need to tell you something about the wand. Harry stopped. Professor, I've thought about what you said, about the allegiance chain, about breaking it. Dumbledore pulled the Elder Wand from his robes and held it out, not pointing at Harry, not threatening, offering. You were right. The wand has been a burden I should have released long ago. I held it out of pride and fear and the belief that I was the only one who could be trusted with it, all of which were expressions of the same arrogance that has defined my worst mistakes. Harry looked at the wand. He could feel its power, immense, terrifying, intoxicating even at a distance. The strongest wand in existence, and Dumbledore was offering it to him. I don't want it, Harry said. I know, that's why I trust you with this. Dumbledore held the wand out further. Take it, not to use, to end. You know the old magic, Harry. You know things I never learned. If anyone can break the wand's cycle of violence, it's you. Harry reached out and took the Elder Wand. The moment his fingers closed around it, he felt a surge of power that made every other magical experience in his life feel like a candle compared to the sun. The wand recognized him, recognized the Peverell blood, recognized the ring's magic, recognized the invisibility cloak's resonance. It sang in his hand, a high, keening note of triumph. Master, the wand whispered. Finally, a worthy master. Harry held the wand and felt its seduction, the promise of limitless power, the assurance that no enemy could stand against him, the sweet whisper that he could protect everyone he loved if he just held on. He held it for exactly 5 seconds. Then he snapped it. The Elder Wand, the Death Stick, the Wand of Destiny, the weapon that had shaped 1,000 years of conflict, broke cleanly in half. The core, the straw-tail hair, silver and gleaming, disintegrated into motes of light that drifted upward and vanished. The wood went dark, dead, ordinary. The singing stopped. Harry let the pieces fall from his hands, and they hit the stone floor with a sound like the last note of a very long song. Dumbledore stared at the broken wand. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open, and in his expression Harry saw something he'd never expected to see on the face of Albus Dumbledore. Liberation. It's done, Dumbledore whispered. It's done. Voldemort can chase the Elder Wand's trail all the way to you, and when he gets here he'll find nothing. The chain is broken. The wand is dead. Dumbledore closed his eyes. A tear tracked down his cheek. Thank you, Harry. Don't thank me. Just rest, Professor. You've done enough. Harry left Dumbledore standing in the corridor with the broken pieces of the Elder Wand at his feet and walked toward the great hall, where his friends were waiting, where dinner was being served, where the world was continuing its ordinary business despite the extraordinary things that had happened beneath its surface. The ring pulsed on his finger. The spirits hummed. 5 Horcruxes neutralized, the Elder Wand destroyed, a coalition built, an army assembling. 1 Horcrux remained. 1 enemy stood. And Harry Potter, the last son of a 1,000-year legacy, walked through the corridors of Hogwarts with his head up and his magic singing, and the certain knowledge that the end was coming, and he would be ready for it.